Chapter 2001. Even though Ba Ling was still angry, he did not get into a conflict with Xiao Chen at this time. After all, this was during the Six Sects Conference and not during normal times. Even though Ba Ling was still angry, he did not get into a conflict with Xiao Chen at this time. After all, this was during the Six Sects Conference and not during normal times. Xiao Chen and the other 5 took their seat. Then, as the host, Bai Song, smiled and said, "Everyone, since everyone is here, let's begin." There were a total of 2 stages to the Six Sects Conference. The first stage was now, where the sect masters of the 6 super first-rate forces sat together to have a secret discussion. As for the second stage, it was relatively more casual. It was a banquet, and many sect masters of the first-rate forces were invited to attend. Of course, the purpose of this was naturally to better show the powerful strength of the 6 super first-rate forces. What was really important was the content that Xiao Chen and the other 5 people were discussing. This was the real core of the Six Sects Conference. As for the content of this discussion, it was different every time. After all, the situation in the Great Thousand World was not constant. However, there was one thing that had never been missing, and that was the exchange of resources. There was no doubt that there were many resources in the Great Thousand World. However, at the level of Bai Song, He Sui, and the others, 99% of the cultivation resources were not of much use to them. At their level, only the real peerless treasures were useful to their cultivation. Naturally, there were not many of such peerless treasures in the Great Thousand World. Therefore, even though the 6 people present were the sect masters of the super first-rate forces, they did not dare to say that they would be able to obtain these peerless treasures. Moreover, there were many times when the treasures that were useful to one happened to be obtained by others. This was not uncommon. Therefore, when the Six Sect Conference was held, the exchange of cultivation resources had almost become a management. The 6 super first-rate forces would take out some resources to exchange with each other. Some cultivation resources that were useless to them but useful to others, or cultivation resources that they fancied in the hands of others could be exchanged. Of course, the premise was that both parties had to agree. A day passed in the main hall. The 6 people discussed a lot of things on this day. However, Xiao Chen didn't think that most of them had any substantial effect. For example, Xiao Chen would never believe that they would agree to advance and retreat together and form an alliance. What a joke! Xiao Chen would never do such a stupid thing as putting his life in the hands of others and pinning his hopes on others. Therefore, during the conversation, Xiao Chen didn't speak much. It wasn't until everyone was almost done talking that Xiao Chen became spirited. Knowing that the other 5 sects had many good items, Xiao Chen naturally didn't want to miss out on them. As the exchange segment began, He Sui was the first to speak as he looked at Xiao Chen. Sect leader Xiao Chen, my Black Emperor sect is willing to exchange for your sword sect's celestial honorable stone. As long as Xiao Chen names a price, we can discuss any conditions. Celestial honorable stone, that was the treasure that He Sui had always wanted. The reason why the Black Emperor sect wanted to wipe out the Sword sect was because of this stone. This was because it was said that this celestial honorable stone could allow one to break through to the End Realm. Of course, no one could prove whether this was true or not, as it was all hearsay. Moreover, there were very few celestial honorable stones. Based on what was known in the history of the Great Thousand World, there were only 3 celestial honorable stones. No one could prove whether or not 3 celestial honorable stones could help one break through to the End Realm. However, since there were such rumors, it meant that even if the celestial honorable stone couldn't help one break through to the End Realm, it could at least increase one's chances. He Sui had been stuck at the End Realm for many years and wasn't able to break through. Now, as long as there was a chance, he wouldn't let it go. This was the first time the Sword sect was participating in the Six Sect gathering. He Sui wanted to make the first move and immediately said that he was willing to exchange for the celestial honorable stone. When they heard He Sui's words, Bai Song, Ba Ling, and the other three all said that they were willing to exchange for the celestial honorable stone with the sword sect. The temptation of the celestial honorable stone to He Sui and the others was self-evident. However, facing the five of them, Shao Chen said, "The celestial honorable stone is the treasure of my sword sect and was obtained by sword venerable Patian. My sword sect won't exchange for it." Shao Chen indeed had no intention of exchanging for the celestial honorable stone. What a joke, this was a true treasure. Although Shao Chen didn't know whether or not the celestial honorable stone was useful, it didn't stop Shao Chen from placing importance on it. He would keep it and use it when he broke through. Naturally, he wouldn't exchange for it. Both Taoist Bai Song and He Sui were disappointed to see Shao Chen reject their offer. However, they had already guessed that it would be strange if Shao Chen was willing to trade a treasure like the Heavenly Master Stone. They had expected this, so when they heard Shao Chen reject it, although they were disappointed, they weren't surprised. On the other hand, when Ba Ling saw Shao Chen reject it, he said coldly, "Ignorant kid, isn't it the saying that a man's wealth is his own ruin?" Ba Ling's words were obviously a threat to Shao Chen. After all, the celestial honorable stone of the sword sect was coveted by all five forces. Perhaps the five forces would join forces to besiege the sword sect for the celestial honorable stone. When that happened, the sword sect wouldn't be able to withstand it. However, when he heard Ba Ling's words, Shao Chen smiled nonchalantly. "Come on then. I'd like to see who will join forces with you for the celestial honorable stone. Furthermore, there's only one celestial honorable stone. How are you going to split it?" Shao Chen wasn't worried about the five great sects joining forces. First of all, it was simply impossible. The five great sects were all on guard against each other and were suspicious of each other. Under such circumstances, it would be very difficult for them to truly join forces. Secondly, as Shao Chen had said, there was only one celestial honorable stone. If the five great sects joined forces, how were they going to split it? He believed that everyone present understood this point. Moreover, even if the five great sects joined forces in the end, Shao Chen could just throw the celestial honorable stone out and let the five great sects fight for it. At that time, the sword sect would be able to take advantage of the situation. Therefore, with so many concerns, the possibility of the five great sects joining forces was almost zero. Upon hearing Shao Chen's words, Ba Ling snorted coldly and didn't refute. In fact, he had just said those words to disgust Shao Chen. In his heart, he had never thought of joining forces to besiege the sword sect and snatch the celestial honorable stone, because Ba Ling himself knew that it was unrealistic. Ba Ling chose to remain silent. He Sui, Taoist Master Bai Song, and the other three also dismissed the idea in their hearts. Snatching the celestial honorable stone was unrealistic. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Content_1 Content_2 Content_3 Content_4 Content_5 Content_6 Content_7 Content_8 Content_9 Content_10 Content_11 Content_12 Content_13 Chapter 2002 Shao Chen would definitely not exchange the heavenly honorable stone, and it was unrealistic to snatch it from him. Hence, He Sui, Bai Song, and the other four gave up on the idea of exchanging the heavenly honorable stone. Shao Chen would definitely not exchange the heavenly honorable stone, and it was unrealistic to snatch it from him. Hence, He Sui, Bai Song, and the other 4 gave up on the idea of exchanging the heavenly honorable stone. The heavenly honorable stone was out of the question, but there were other items that could pique everyone's interest. Although they were not as good as the heavenly honorable stone, they were still useful for their cultivation. After rejecting the 5 of them, Shao Chun smiled and said, "The Sword Sect has no intention of exchanging the heavenly honorable stone, but the 7-colored lotus is possible." The 7-colored lotus. Upon hearing Shao Chen's words, He Sui and the other 4 were stunned. Then, they turned to look at Shao Chen. Although the 7-colored lotus could not be compared to the heavenly honorable stone, it was still one of the top treasures in the Great Thousand World. Hence, everyone was excited that Shao Chen was willing to exchange the 7-colored lotus. He Sui, Bai Song, and the other 3 immediately made their offers. Only Ba Ling did not make a move. He was probably still angry about what had happened earlier. Knowing the value of the 7-colored lotus, He Sui, Bai Song, and the other 3 offered a high price. Moreover, since Shao Chen was willing to exchange the 7-colored lotus, he obviously knew the value of the 7-colored lotus. Hence, there was no deception at all. The 4 of them were very interested in the 7-colored lotus, but in the end, Taoist Bai Song was more willing to part with it. Shao Chen also agreed to exchange the 7-colored lotus with Taoist Bai Song after hearing about his conditions. The cultivation resources that Shao Chen exchanged were basically targeted at the comprehension state and Tao realm martial artists. This level of cultivation resource naturally could not be compared to the 7-colored lotus, but it happened to be what Shao Chen needed the most at the moment. Not only Shao Chen, but Qin Shuru, Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, and the others also happened to need this level of cultivation resource. Moreover, a single 7-colored lotus could be exchanged for a considerable amount of resources. In Shao Chen's opinion, it was indeed worth it. What he needed was the real treasure. This was what Shao Chen had always believed in. Although the 7-colored lotus was precious, he didn't need it now. It was just a decoration in the Sword Sect's treasury. It was better to exchange it. Of course, there was more than one 7-colored lotus in the Sword Sect. Therefore, Shao Chen wouldn't feel distressed to exchange it for something useful to him. The 7-colored lotus was obtained by Bai Song. After the exchange, both of them accepted each other's treasures with satisfaction. There were no special rules. This exchange of resources was originally an exchange of resources that were useful to one another. Therefore, after Bai Song and Shao Chen finished their exchange, He Sui, Ba Ling, and the others also took out their treasures to exchange for other treasures that they wanted or were useful to them. The sect masters of the 6 super first-rate forces seemed to be holding a small exchange meeting as they exchanged their treasures with each other. As the exchange went on, Shao Chen's gains greatly exceeded his expectations. At the same time, he couldn't help but sigh. These 6 super first-rate forces had a strong foundation. He originally thought that the Sword Sect's foundation should be much stronger than the other 5 forces. However, what surprised Shao Chen was that compared to the Sword Sect, the Taiqing Temple, the Black Emperor Sect, and the Longhu Sect weren't much weaker. It was precisely because the 5 forces had strong backgrounds that Shao Chen needed a lot of treasures that the Sword Sect didn't have. During this exchange, Shao Chen obtained a lot of treasures that Shao Chen needed. Moreover, because the treasures that Shao Chen needed didn't conflict with those of Bai Song, He Sui, and the others, the 5 of them liked to exchange with Shao Chen very much. After all, exchanging treasures that were useless to them for treasures that were useful to them was the most perfect outcome. Who would refuse such an offer? Shao Chen's gains were bountiful. Similarly, the treasures that Shao Chen took out satisfied Bai Song and the others. Later on, Ba Ling also exchanged 1 or 2 treasures with Shao Chen. Shao Chen didn't refuse. Although Shao Chen and Ba Ling didn't see eye to eye with each other, they naturally wouldn't refuse treasures that were useful to them and the other party happened to be willing to exchange them. As for the enmity between them, they could obviously put it aside and exchange for treasures that were useful to them first. The exchange of cultivation resources was obviously the favorite part of the 6 people present. It was also the most exciting part. While Xiao Chun and the others were exchanging cultivation resources, on the other side, in the cave abode that the people of the Sword Sect were temporarily staying in, Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling could only wait there because they weren't qualified to accompany Xiao Chen into the main hall. Sitting opposite each other and looking at Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing said worriedly, "It's been almost 2 days. Will little brother be okay?" "I don't think so. Moreover, it's only been 2 days. The 5-sect gathering would take at least 3 days to end," Xianyuan Ling said calmly. Xiao Chen's cultivation was far inferior to Bai Song and the others, but during the 6-sect gathering, Bai Song and the others wouldn't attack Xiao Chen. There was no need to worry about Xiao Chen's safety. Moreover, Zhou Song and Wu Huan were still guarding outside the main hall. If anything happened, the 2 of them would definitely save Xiao Chen immediately. Moreover, Xiao Chen still had a space compass on him. If there was any danger, Xiao Chen would have a way to escape. One had to know that once the space compass was used, even an end-realm expert wouldn't be able to interrupt it. One could say that in terms of his own safety, Xiao Chen was fully prepared. This wasn't to say that Xiao Chen was a coward. It was because with Xiao Chen's current status, the people he came into contact with were all end-realm experts. Like Bai Song, He Sui, Ba Ling, any one of them could shake the world with a stomp of their feet. To come into contact with such experts, Xiao Chen's cultivation was only at the comprehension realm. If he wasn't prepared, he really had no choice. After all, if an end-realm expert wanted to attack Xiao Chen, they wouldn't need to spend much effort. Since his cultivation couldn't be on the same level as those experts, then naturally, he could only borrow external strength to protect himself. Since he didn't need to worry about Xiao Chen's safety, Long Qing relaxed. The 2 of them chatted for a while and felt a little bored. Then, they left the cave and strolled around Taiqing Temple. He didn't know that Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling were worried about him. At this moment, Xiao Chen had already earned a lot. He had been searching for many cultivation resources that the Sword Sect didn't have. In this exchange, Xiao Chen obtained many of them. One could say that according to Xiao Chen's estimation, the gains this time would allow him to last until the Dao realm completion. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2003. Xiao Chen and the other sect masters of the 6 super first-rate forces had a secret discussion in the Taiqing Temple's main hall for 3 days. After 3 days, the 6 of them finally concluded their secret discussion. Xiao Chen and the other sect masters of the 6 super first-rate forces had a secret discussion in the Taiqing Temple's main hall for 3 days. After 3 days, the 6 of them finally concluded their secret discussion. Although many people were curious about the contents of the secret conversation between the 6 of them, no one dared to ask. Of course, as the person involved, Xiao Chen did not lose out at all by participating in the 6 sects conference this time. At least, he got a lot of cultivation resources that he needed. After the secret discussion, the second part of the 6 sect Great Assembly began. At the same time, the sect masters and sect masters of the various first-rate forces arrived at the Taiqing Temple one after another. These first-rate forces had also received invitations to the 6th sect Great Assembly. Of course, they weren't qualified to participate in the first part of the assembly. They could only wait until Xiao Chen and the other sect masters of the 6 super first-rate forces finished their discussion before they could rush to the Taiqing Temple. Many sect masters of the first-rate forces had also received invitations. Xiao Chen didn't care much about these first-rate forces as the experts of the Taiqing Temple would naturally return to deal with them. After the meeting ended, Xiao Chen directly returned to his cave residence and waited for the banquet to begin. In the cave residence, Shao Chen, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Nangong Guan were gathered together. Nangong Guan had also received an invitation to the Sixth Sect Great Assembly. As the sect master of family Nangong, Nangong Guan naturally had to represent family Nangong to participate in the assembly. As Shao Chen's senior brother, Nangong Guan and the other experts of family Nangong didn't need to be invited by the Taiqing Temple. They directly stayed together with Shao Chen and the others. Since they had to wait for the various first-rate forces sect masters to arrive, the banquet would only begin after a few more days. However, Shao Chen wasn't in a hurry about it. It was said that the Sixth Sect Great Assembly this time had 30 to 40 first-rate forces participating. The scale could be said to be the grandest one in history. After waiting for 3 days, the banquet was finally held as scheduled. The Great Pure One Temple was located on the beautiful mountain peak. This was the place where the banquet was held. There were not many people attending the banquet. Including the sect leaders, and their companions, there were only a few hundred people. There were 6 elegant pavilions. These were the seats of the 6 super first-rate forces. As for the leaders of the first-rate forces, they only had a short table and a futon. Everyone gathered together. The purpose of this banquet was to show the strength of the 6 super first-rate forces and to rope in the first-rate forces present. It should be noted that more than half of the first-rate forces that attended the banquet were affiliated sects of the 6 super first-rate forces. For example, the Black Emperor sect had a total of 3 first-rate powers under its command. As for the others like the Longhu sect, Sky Temple, and Vast Summit City, they also had first-rate powers under their command. Only the Sword sect did not seem to have any first-rate powers under its command. However, Shao Chen did not care about this. He did not value these first-rate forces too much. To put it bluntly, although it sounded good to have a first-rate force under their command, in fact, in Shao Chen's opinion, it was only a superficial thing. In reality, it did not have much of an effect. If one was strong enough, it was not important to have a first-rate force under their command. Moreover, if the Sword sect was able to regain its position as one of the 10 great Lingtian sects one day, would there be a need to be afraid that there would not be any first-rate forces under their command? Due to this reason, Shao Chen was not very enthusiastic about roping in these first-rate forces. He was only slightly closer to Nangong Guan and the people from family Nangong. The banquet continued and everyone chatted with each other. However, during the banquet, Ba Ling suddenly looked at Shao Chen and said, "Sect leader Shao Chen, are you interested in sparring with the people from our sects?" Ba Ling suddenly asked. Upon hearing this, everyone present looked at Shao Chen. Although Ba Ling said sparring, his motive was very simple. He just wanted to embarrass the Sword sect. Upon hearing Ba Ling's words, Shao Chen's expression did not change much. He glanced at him and said nonchalantly, "Since sect leader Ba Ling is interested, let's do it." Ba Ling was deliberately targeting the Sword sect. Since that was the case, Shao Chen naturally would not back down. Moreover, sparring during the Sixth Sect competition was a very normal thing to do. Upon hearing Shao Chen's words, Ba Ling sneered and glanced at a young man beside him. This young man was a genius disciple of the Longhu sect. He was Ba Ling's disciple. This time, he came with Ba Ling. He was a genius in the comprehension realm. Ba Ling immediately sent out his disciple. In response, before Shao Chen could say anything, Long Qing spoke first. "Let me do it. I haven't fought in a long time. I'm a little bored." Shao Chen originally planned to fight Ba Ling's disciple himself, but Long Qing beat him to it. In fact, Long Qing took the initiative to fight for Shao Chen. After all, Shao Chen was the headmaster of Swords Gate. Although everyone present knew that Shao Chen's cultivation base could not be compared with Ba Ling and the others due to his age, Shao Chen was still the headmaster of Swords Gate. However, as the sect leader, if Shao Chen personally fought Ba Ling's disciple, regardless of whether he won or lost, it would at least be embarrassing. After all, Xiao Chen was the sect leader of the Sword Sect, while Ba Ling's disciple was only a disciple of the Longhu sect. There was a huge gap between their statuses. Upon hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chen naturally knew what she was thinking. Therefore, he did not refuse. Besides, Xiao Chen was very confident in Long Qing's strength. Upon hearing that Long Qing was going to fight, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Nangong Guan, and several powerhouses of the Sword Sect were curious. They knew that Long Qing and Xiao Chen were sworn siblings. However, after so many years, Long Qing and Long Qing had never fought. Therefore, they were curious about Long Qing's strength. After saying that, Lin Qing slowly walked out of the pavilion of the Sword Sect and came to the center of the mountain peak. At the same time, Ba Ling's disciple also stepped forward and stood in front of Long Qing. The young man's name was Zhou Mu. It could be said that he was the strongest among Ba Ling's disciples. He was also the eldest disciple of the Longhu sect. The two of them stood facing each other. Looking at Long Qing, Zhou Mu sneered. I originally wanted to fight the sect leader of the Sword Sect. You're not worthy of me fighting, Long Qing said coldly. She did not give Zhou Mu any face. Upon hearing Long Qing's words, a cold light flashed in Zhou Mu's eyes. Then, he said coldly, I hope your strength is as powerful as your mouth. After saying that, a terrifying aura exploded from Zhou Mu's body. Seeing this, Long Qing was not to be outdone. She also released her own aura. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 2004. Zhou Mu was at the initial stage of the Enlightenment realm, while Long Qing was at the initial stage of the Enlightenment realm. Judging from their cultivation alone, Zhou Mu should be stronger. However, at this moment, as both of them unleashed their auras, Long Qing wasn't much weaker than Zhou Mu. Feeling Long Qing's domineering aura, Zhou Mu's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Dragon race, interesting. So what? As he spoke, Zhou Mu took the lead and punched towards Long Qing. Facing Zhou Mu's attack, Long Qing didn't have any intention of dodging. He also punched out and collided head-on with Zhou Mu's. Longhu sect placed a lot of emphasis on the cultivation of the physical body. Hence, from Ba Ling to the ordinary disciples of Longhu sect, their physical bodies were extremely strong. However, as a pure-blooded dragon, Long Qing's physical strength wasn't weak either. The two men's fists collided, and a terrifying force spread out in all directions. However, no one in the audience cared about this at all. After all, apart from the younger disciples, the rest of the people who were able to attend this banquet were basically End Realm almighties. The weakest was a Dao Realm expert. Experts like them naturally weren't afraid of the shockwaves from the battle between Long Qing and Zhou Mu. They sat calmly on the spot and watched the intense battle between Long Qing and Zhou Mu. Under everyone's gaze, Long Qing and Zhou Mu were also engaged in a fierce battle. Both of them had strong physical bodies, and the fight was extremely intense and hot-blooded. Moreover, their fighting styles were very similar, simple and violent. With their terrifying physical strength, as their fists continuously punched out, ripples appeared in the space. At the start, Zhou Mu looked down on Long Qing. However, as the battle continued, Zhou Mu gradually stopped looking down on him. Although Long Qing's cultivation was a small realm lower than his strength wasn't any weaker than Zhou Mu's. Especially in terms of physical strength, Long Qing wasn't afraid of Zhou Mu at all. This made Zhou Mu start to take Long Qing seriously. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged hundreds of blows. At this time, flames began to burn on Zhou Mu's body. Not long after, Zhou Mu's entire body seemed to be wrapped in flames. Seeing Zhou Mu's transformation, many of the people present murmured softly. Flowing Flame Battle Body. The Flowing Flame Battle Body was the most famous body tempering technique in the Longhu sect. It was also the strongest body tempering technique. Who would have thought that Zhou Mu had already learned the flowing flame battle body? With the flowing fire battle body, Zhou Mu's physical strength was probably close to that of a Dao realm expert. Moreover, the most terrifying thing about the flowing fire battle body was that it became stronger the more he fought. As the battle continued, Zhou Mu's physical strength grew stronger and stronger until he reached his peak state after using the flowing fire battle body. Now, Zhou Mu was able to fight Long Qing to a standstill. Moreover, after using the flowing flame battle body, as time passed and the battle continued, Zhou Mu's flowing flame battle body would become stronger and stronger. At that time, if Long Qing didn't have any trump cards, the one who would lose would probably be Long Qing. The fierce battle continued. After Zhou Mu used the flowing fire battle body, he became more and more courageous. Gradually, Long Qing was being suppressed. Feeling that he had the upper hand, Zhou Mu's battle intent intensified. He looked at Long Qing and sneered. "Your strength is not bad. You are worthy of me. How about it? Be my woman and I won't treat you badly." The moment he opened his mouth, he wanted Long Qing to be his woman. Hearing this, Long Qing's eyes flashed with a cold light. Zhou Mu had indeed taken a liking to Long Qing. Firstly, Long Qing's appearance wasn't bad. She could even be said to be devastatingly beautiful. Moreover, Long Qing was also very strong, especially in terms of physical strength. As the first disciple of the Longhu sect, Zhou Mu naturally didn't lack women. However, Long Qing could be said to be the first woman that had truly moved his heart. In Zhou Mu's opinion, only a woman like Long Qing was worthy of him. It was a pity that Zhou Mu was interested in Long Qing. However, after hearing this, Long Qing replied coldly, "Let's talk about it after you defeat me." Long Qing clearly wasn't interested in Zhou Mu. Hearing this, Zhou Mu smiled and said, "That's not difficult at all." As he spoke, Zhou Mu's attacks became more ferocious. Long Qing also became more and more difficult to deal with. Seeing that Long Qing was about to be completely suppressed by Zhou Mu, the crowd thought that the battle was about to end. However, at this moment, a green light suddenly shot out from Long Qing's body. Following the appearance of the green light, a dragon tribe aura that was even purer and denser than before spread out. Long Qing was originally a pure-blooded dragon clan member, so her dragon clan aura could be said to be incomparably pure. However, the dragon clan aura that Long Qing released was at least several times thicker than before. Even a pure-blooded dragon clan member wouldn't possess such a dense dragon clan aura. Sensing the dragon clan aura that spread out from Long Qing's body, many people's faces changed drastically, including Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and the others. Even Wu Huan couldn't help but blurt out, "Ancestral dragon. Long Qing is the ancestral dragon?" Only the ancestral dragon could possess such a pure dragon clan aura. What kind of existence was the ancestral dragon? It was an existence that surpassed the End Realm. Currently, the Dragon Clan was one of the 10 great Lingtian sects, and the ancestral dragon was an existence that was on the same level as Jun Huia and Dan Qingyang. The ancestral dragon was undoubtedly the king of the Dragon Clan. Currently, there was only one ancestral dragon in the Great Thousand World. No one had expected to see one here. As Long Qing released her ancestral dragon aura, everyone present was stunned. Even though they were all End Realm experts and had seen a lot, they were still shocked to see an ancestral dragon all of a sudden. It couldn't be helped. Ancestral dragons were just too rare. Moreover, every ancestral dragon that was born was an existence that defied the heavens. This little lass is actually an ancestral dragon. Many people exclaimed in astonishment. Ignoring everyone's shock, Long Qing, who was gradually being suppressed, instantly turned the situation around after revealing her ancestral dragon aura. Although the flowing fire battle body was strong, it was still a far cry from the ancestral dragon bloodline. Therefore, after Long Qing used her ancestral dragon bloodline, Zhou Mu was completely suppressed by Long Qing without any surprise. After using her ancestral dragon bloodline, Long Qing's physical strength was no weaker than a Dao realm expert. Her physical strength was indeed much stronger than Zhou Mu's. For a moment, Zhou Mu was almost being defeated by Long Qing. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2005. No one expected Long Qing to have the ancestral dragon bloodline. Under everyone's gaze, Long Qing completely suppressed Zhou Mu. Not long after, Zhou Mu was sent flying with a punch from Long Qing. The outcome of the battle was clear. Zhou Mu didn't lose out to Long Qing. She had the ancestral dragon bloodline. Even though Zhou Mu had the flowing fire battle body, he was obviously no match for her. Ba Ling's expression was ugly after Zhou Mu was defeated. After all, it was in front of so many people. Originally, Ba Ling wanted to embarrass Xiao Chen, but he didn't expect Zhou Mu to be defeated in the end. If it was just a defeat, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, Long Qing's cultivation was lower than Zhou Mu's by a small realm. In this way, Long Qing had defeated Zhou Mu. As the eldest disciple of the Longhu sect, Zhou Mu was defeated by someone who was of a higher realm. What would the experts present think? Was their Longhu sect not strong enough? His expression was extremely gloomy. Compared to Ba Ling's gloominess, Xiao Chen on the other side had a faint smile on his face. Xiao Chen wasn't surprised that Long Qing defeated Zhou Mu. Xiao Chen naturally knew his second sister's strength. Especially after obtaining the ancestral dragon bloodline, Long Qing's combat strength had increased by a lot. After the battle ended, Long Qing didn't say much. She directly walked back to the pavilion where the sword sect was. When she came in front of Xiao Chen, Long Qing smiled mischievously. "How was it? I didn't embarrass our sword sect, right?" Hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chen smiled and nodded. After the battle ended, everyone present looked in the direction of the sword sect. Their eyes revealed a strange expression. In the current sword sect, not only did they have 6 end realm experts, but they also had many talents in the younger generation. Needless to say, Xiao Chen possessed the sword body and was the successor of the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. As Jun Wuya's disciple, his combat strength was definitely at the top among his peers. As for Long Qing, the combat strength he displayed today was not weak at all. The experts of the older generation weren't any weaker than the other super first-rate forces, and the younger generation had an aura that surpassed their predecessors. As a result, it would be difficult for the sword sect to not rise. Everyone's opinion of the sword sect had changed. In the following banquet, Ba Ling didn't dare to provoke the sword sect. Firstly, Ba Ling knew that the sword sect wasn't something he could bully at will. The banquet continued, and as time passed, the atmosphere gradually became livelier. Actually, Xiao Chen wasn't too interested in such a banquet. However, this was the sixth sect great meeting after all, and Xiao Chen couldn't just leave. The banquet lasted for an entire day, and only when the banquet ended did everyone leave. They didn't stay in the Tai Ching temple for long. After the sixth sect great meeting ended, Xiao Chen and his group left the Tai Ching temple the next day. Daoist Bai Song personally sent them off. Daoist Bai Song and the Tai Ching temple had shown enough discussion about the sword sect and Xiao Chen. From Daoist Bai Song's actions, it wasn't hard to see that the Tai Ching temple was willing to be on good terms with the sword sect. Anyone could see that the sword sect had huge potential. Moreover, the Tai Ching temple and the sword sect were very far apart, so there wouldn't be any conflicts of interest. As such, being on good terms with the sword sect was obviously beneficial to the Tai Ching temple. With Daoist Bai Song personally sending them off, Xiao Chen and his group left the Tai Ching temple and prepared to return to the sword sect. However, just as Xiao Chen and his group were preparing to return to the sword sect, a group of higher-ups from the heavenly sect gathered in the main hall of the Tianzhou region. There were a total of 8 End Realm experts, but the sect leader wasn't there. However, with 8 End Realm experts gathered together, it was obvious that the Heavenly Sect was going to make a big move. At this moment, one of them spoke first. "The Sixth Sect Great Meeting has ended. How are the preparations?" "Everything is ready, but this time, Zhou Song and Wu Huan have been following beside Xiao Qin." Hearing this, another person spoke. All along, the Heavenly Sect hadn't acted against the Sword Sect. Everyone thought that the Heavenly Sect didn't have the time to do anything, but who would have thought that the Heavenly Sect actually wanted to kill Xiao Qin? It wasn't a secret that Xiao Qin was going to participate in the Sixth Sect Great Meeting, and the Heavenly Sect's plan was very simple. They would send people to kill Xiao Qin while he was on the way back to the Sword Sect. Killing Xiao Qin on the way back was obviously much easier than killing Xiao Qin in the Sword Sect. Moreover, this time, Xiao Qin only had Zhou Song and Wu Huan, 2 End Realm experts protecting him. Hearing this, the person who spoke before nodded slightly and then said coldly, "Then let's do it. This time, we have to directly kill Xiao Qin." The Heavenly Sect and the Sword Sect already had enmity, and now that the Sword Sect was rising up, it was something that the Heavenly Sect didn't want to see. Therefore, even if the sect leader of the Heavenly Sect was in seclusion, the other deputy sect leaders felt that they couldn't give the Sword Sect a chance to grow. They had to kill the threat of the Sword Sect in the cradle. Only then would the higher-ups of the Heavenly Sect be prepared to kill Xiao Qin. No one had any objections to the plan to kill Xiao Qin. Moreover, in order to succeed, the Heavenly Sect sent out a total of 5 End Realm experts to ensure that they would succeed in one strike and not give Xiao Qin any chance. The plan was more or less done. That day, 5 End Realm experts of the Heavenly Sect secretly set off from Tianzhou and rushed towards the planned location. As one of the 10 great Lingtian sects, the Heavenly Sect actually dared to do such a thing. From this, one could see their fear and killing intent towards the Sword Sect. They definitely couldn't allow the Sword Sect to grow. Otherwise, it would definitely be a threat to the Heavenly Sect. With the enmity between the Heavenly Sect and the Sword Sect, if the Sword Sect wanted to become one of the 10 great Lingtian sects, their first target would definitely be the Heavenly Sect. The experts of the Heavenly Sect were already on their way. However, Xiao Qin didn't know anything about this. Under the protection of Zhou Song and Wu Huan, Xiao Qin rushed towards the Sword Sect. During this Sixth Sect Great Meeting, Xiao Qin obtained many good things. With these treasures, Xiao Qin probably wouldn't need to worry about cultivation resources for a long period of time. After leaving Taiqin Temple, Xiao Qin's group quickly left Taozhou. At this moment, Xiao Qin's group arrived at a city called 100 Martial City. After several days of continuous travel, Xiao Qin's group planned to rest for a night in 100 Martial City. However, what Xiao Qin didn't know was that there were already hundreds of Heavenly Sect experts gathered in 100 Martial City. Moreover, the 5 End Realm experts of the Heavenly Sect had already rushed to 100 Martial City. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2006. Within the 100 Martial City, many experts from the Heavenly Sect were already prepared. The reason why they set the ambush location at 100 Martial City was because if Xiao Qin wanted to return to the Sword Sect, 100 Martial City was a place he had to pass through. Within the 100 Martial City, many experts from the Heavenly Sect were already prepared. The reason why they set the ambush location at 100 Martial City was because if Xiao Qin wanted to return to the Sword Sect, 100 Martial City was a place he had to pass through. Within 100 Martial City, fighting was naturally not allowed. However, such a rule was obviously nothing to the Heavenly Sect. Moreover, the 100 Martial City City Lord Manor, whether it was in front of the Heavenly Sect or the Sword Sect, could be said to be a weak existence. Their strength was far from being comparable to the Heavenly Sect and the Sword Sect. Therefore, the battle between the two sects was simply like a battle between immortals and mortals. At night, in the inn where Xiao Chen and the others were staying, many black figures were quickly approaching. However, just as these black figures approached the inn, Zhou Song and Wu Huan, who were originally sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed, opened their eyes at the same time. The senses of an end-realm expert were extremely sharp. Therefore, it was almost impossible to sneak attack an end-realm expert. As a result, before the people from the heavenly sect could do anything, Zhou Song and Wu Huan had already sensed it. They immediately went to Xiao Chen's room and gathered together. Zhou Song was the first to speak. "Junior brother, it seems like tonight won't be peaceful." Hundreds of people had already surrounded the inn where they were staying. Hearing Zhou Song's words, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with coldness. Who is it? Longhu sect? He still didn't know the identity of these people, but the biggest suspect should be the Longhu sect. After all, in this six-sect meeting, Xiao Chen and Ba Ling didn't get along. At first, Xiao Chen wondered if Ba Ling was going to attack him. However, he quickly dispelled this idea. Although Ba Ling was not on good terms with him, he did not have the guts to kill him at this time. Ba Ling should be well aware of the consequences of trying to kill him. Clearly, he wouldn't do such a stupid thing because once Ba Ling did so, the Sword sect and the Longhu sect would fight to the death. At that time, the Longhu sect would definitely suffer. If it was not Ba Ling, who could it be? Suddenly, Xiao Chen thought of the Coiling Heaven sect. Only the 10 great Ling Tian sects would have the guts to kill the Sword sect. Among the 10 great Ling Tian sects, the one that hated and feared the Sword sect the most was undoubtedly the Coiling Heaven sect. The Coiling Heaven sect definitely didn't want to see the rise of the Sword sect. There was no doubt about this. Just as Xiao Chen was guessing in his heart, the hundreds of black-robed men appeared one after another. Obviously, they also knew that sneak attacks were simply too laughable in front of an end-realm expert. Thus, after confirming that they had completely sealed off Xiao Chen and the others' escape route, the hundreds of experts from the Heavenly Sect also appeared. At the same time, the 5 end-realm experts from the Heavenly Sect also appeared in the courtyard. The door opened and Xiao Chen saw the 5 end-realm experts standing in the courtyard. Xiao Chen even recognized one of them. It was Pasye, whom he saw in the Dan Valley. Since Pasye appeared here, everything was clear. Looking at Pasye and the other 4 Coiling Heaven sect deputy sect heads, a cold intent flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. However, he still walked out of the room with Zhou Song and Wu Huan. He looked at Pasye and the others and laughed coldly. Coiling Heaven sect, as expected, you only know how to do some sneaky things. Why are you planning to kill me? While speaking, Xiao Chen also observed the situation in front of him. Their way out was completely sealed, and they were surrounded by the Coiling Heaven sect experts. There was basically no chance of escaping. His side only had Zhou Song and Wu Huan, 2 end-realm experts. As for the Coiling Heaven sect, apart from the hundreds of experts, they sent out 5 end-realm experts. The strength of both sides were not on the same level. Zhou Song and Wu Huan might be able to block Pasye and the others for a while, but as time passed, the 2 of them obviously weren't their match. His heart sank a little, but on the surface, Xiao Chen didn't show it. Looking at Xiao Chen, Pasye laughed coldly and said with a hoarse voice, "Xiao Chen, you will definitely die today." He had made sufficient preparations. Today, he would definitely kill Xiao Chen here. The killing intent in his eyes couldn't be hidden at all. When he heard Pasye's words, Xiao Chen's heart sank. He could escape. After all, Xiao Chen had a space compass on him. With the space compass, even end-realm experts like Pasye wouldn't be able to stop him. However, there was only one space compass. Xiao Chen could leave, but what about Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Long Qing, and Xianyuan Ling? What about them? He didn't doubt that once he left, they would all die. The Heavenly Sect definitely wouldn't leave them alive. They couldn't leave them behind. This was something that Xiao Chen couldn't do. As if he had seen through Xiao Chen's thoughts, Zhou Song transmitted a message to Xiao Chen. Junior brother, leave by yourself. Don't hesitate. They were completely surrounded by the heavenly sect. With the current situation, it was obviously impossible for them to escape together. Only Xiao Chen could use the space compass to leave by himself. Only then would they have a chance to escape. Hence, Zhou Song didn't hesitate to let Xiao Chen leave by himself. Hearing this, Xiao Chen remained silent. No matter how they thought about it, they would never have thought that the Katian sect would actually do such a thing. As one of the 10 great Lingtian sects, the Katian sect's actions were indeed somewhat degrading. However, no matter what, the Katian sect's move had indeed forced Xiao Chen and the others into a desperate situation. It was obvious that the heavenly sect was prepared. Moreover, their goal was very clear, which was to kill Xiao Chen. From the heavenly sect's point of view, as long as they killed Xiao Chen, the sword sect would be leaderless. By then, there would naturally be no threat. Although the heavenly sect's move was despicable, it was also the smartest way to obtain the greatest benefit with the smallest price. Since they had fallen into such a forbidden area, they could only blame Xiao Chen for underestimating the heavenly sect. In other words, Xiao Chen thought that a top 10 Lingtian sect like the heavenly sect wouldn't do such a thing. After all, as one of the top 10 Lingtian sects, they should have their own pride. He still underestimated the heavenly sect. Hence, Xiao Chen had to pay a heavy price for this. Passia didn't give Xiao Chen and the others much time to think. As soon as he finished speaking, he shouted, "Kill!" Without wasting any time, the group of heavenly sect's experts immediately charged towards Xiao Chen and the others. Seeing this, Zhou Song and the others immediately attacked. Wu Huan even said to Xiao Chen, "Junior brother, let's go." Faced with the meticulously set-up killing trap by the heavenly sect, Zhou Song and Wu Huan couldn't delay for too long. Hence, both of them urged Xiao Chen to leave quickly. If he stayed, he would just be giving up his life for nothing. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2007. The heavenly sect's encirclement came too suddenly, and Xiao Chen and the others were completely unprepared. Now that they were heavily surrounded, Zhou Song and Wu Huan wanted Xiao Chen to leave first. Only Xiao Chen had a spatial compass, and only Xiao Chen could use it to leave. However, when he heard Zhou Song and Wu Huan's words, Xiao Chen didn't hesitate in the slightest and gave up on the idea of leaving by himself. Xiao Chen wasn't someone who was afraid of death, and it was even more impossible for him to abandon everyone at a time like this. Not to mention Zhou Song and Wu Huan, Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling were also here, so how could Xiao Chen leave by himself? When he used the sword realm, Xiao Chen immediately joined the battle. Seeing that Xiao Chen didn't choose to escape, Zhou Song and Wu Huan were stunned, and then they helplessly shouted, "Junior brother, hurry up and leave." "I'm not leaving. If we live together. If we die together," Xiao Chen said with a serious expression. Xiao Chen naturally couldn't abandon everyone and leave by himself. After saying that, Xiao Chen began to fight with an elder from the heavenly sect. The elder had a cultivation level of the Dao realm. However, Xiao Chen was no longer afraid of Dao realm cultivators. He used the sword realm, which shrouded the elder and made him fall into a disadvantageous position for a while. Sword body, as expected of the successor chosen by the heaven-breaking sword sovereign. "However, Xiao Chen, you will definitely die today," Passia said coldly when he felt the sharp aura from the sword realm. The sword realm was indeed powerful. Although Xiao Chen's cultivation was only at the great circle of the comprehension realm, it was enough for him to fight against a Dao realm expert. With the Wuchen sword in hand, Xiao Chen and the heavenly sect elder fought intensely. Although Xiao Chen suppressed the elder, unfortunately, there were just too many people from the heavenly sect. The moment the battle ended, Xiao Qin and the others fell into a disadvantage. Especially Zhou Song and Wu Huan. The two of them had to block 5 End Realm experts, so one could imagine the pressure they felt. Although the two of them were still entangled with Xie and the others, as time passed, Zhou Song and Wu Huan became more and more powerless. They wanted to break out of the encirclement, but the heavenly sect was prepared and didn't give Xiao Qin and the others a chance at all. Under the intense battle, the people from the sword sect were all injured, especially Xiao Qin. After all, the goal of the heavenly sect was to kill Xiao Qin, which was why almost all of the heavenly sect experts were targeting Xiao Qin. Even though Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, and the others were trying their best to reduce the pressure on Xiao Qin, unfortunately, there were still more than 10 heavenly sect experts surrounding Xiao Qin. Xiao Qin was the first target, so naturally, he was under the most pressure. It was also because Zhou Song and Wu Huan risked their lives to block Xie and the others. Otherwise, Xiao Qin would have already been killed. It was easy to imagine the pressure Xiao Qin was under when he had to fight against more than a dozen cultivators from the Katian sect, and the weakest among them was in the realm of enlightenment. There were already many injuries on his body. If it wasn't for the power of the sword world, Xiao Qin probably wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. However, as the injuries on his body became more and more obvious, Xiao Qin also felt a sense of helplessness. Sensing that Xiao Qin was getting weaker, one of the heavenly sect elders surrounding Xiao Qin laughed coldly. Xiao Qin, stop fighting like a cornered beast. You don't have any chance today. They sent out so many people and prepared for so long just to kill Xiao Qin. How could the heavenly sect let Xiao Qin have a chance to escape tonight? The intense battle continued in the inn, but no one in the entire 100 Martial City dared to get close. In front of the heavenly sect, the rules of 100 Martial City weren't even worth mentioning. If the heavenly sect wanted to kill Xiao Qin in 100 Martial City, who would dare to say no? No one dared to stop them, and Xiao Qin found it harder and harder to deal with the dozens of heavenly sect experts in front of him. Not only Xiao Qin, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, and the others also found it hard to block the attacks of the heavenly sect. Seeing that everyone was in danger, Xie and the other heavenly sect experts heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like there wouldn't be any big problems today. Xiao Qin had to die. Without Xiao Qin, the leaderless sword sect would naturally fall apart. At that time, the heavenly sect wouldn't have to worry about the threat of the sword sect. In a short few decades, the sudden rise of the sword sect was naturally related to Xiao Qin. As long as they killed Xiao Qin, the sword sect naturally wouldn't have any chance of rising again. The heavenly sect was clear that as long as they killed Xiao Qin, they would be able to completely eliminate the threat of the sword sect. Seeing that it was getting harder and harder to hold on, Zhou Song couldn't help but shout at Xiao Qin. "Junior brother, let's go. Don't give up your life for nothing." Looking at the current situation, if they stayed, they would definitely die. If Xiao Qin escaped, the sword sect would still have a chance to survive. However, after hearing Zhou Song's words, Xiao Qin shook his head. "Second senior brother, it's useless. Even if I leave today, will the heavenly sect let the sword sect go?" Xiao Qin still didn't have any intentions of leaving. The reason was simple. The heavenly sect definitely wouldn't let him go. They also wouldn't let the sword sect go. Even if Xiao Qin escaped today, they would lose Zhou Song and Wu Huan. In the future, the heavenly sect would still attack the sword sect. What would they do then? At the start, Xiao Qin thought that the heavenly sect wouldn't attack the sword sect so quickly. However, it seemed like his thoughts were too simple. Maybe Xiao Qin underestimated the heavenly sect's determination to destroy the sword sect. Even if they couldn't go all out against the sword sect, as long as the heavenly sect took out a portion of their strength, it would be hard for the sword sect to resist. The heavenly sect might not be able to go all out against the sword sect for now, But that didn't mean that they didn't have the ability to destroy the Sword Sect. Even if they couldn't put all their efforts into the Sword Sect, as one of the top 10 Lingtian sects, even if the Heavenly Sect only took out half of their strength, they would be able to go against the Sword Sect. This was how terrifying the top 10 Lingtian sects were. The Heavenly Sect wasn't willing to let the Sword Sect rise and wanted to kill the Sword Sect's threat in the cradle. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Zhou Song and Wu Huan were both stunned. Then, they fell into silence. Xiao Chen was right. Even if they escaped today, the Heavenly Sect would definitely attack the Sword Sect in the future. What would they do then? To put it bluntly, the Sword Sect was still too weak. If the Sword Sect was stronger, they wouldn't have to fear the Heavenly Sect. However, after a moment of silence, Zhou Song and Wu Huan both said at the same time, "No matter what, junior brother, you should leave first. When Master comes back, he won't sit by and do nothing. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2008. Zhou Song and Wu Huan knew that what Xiao Chen said was true. Even if Xiao Chen used the space compass to escape, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, and the other Sword Sect experts would definitely die here. Zhou Song and Wu Huan knew that what Xiao Chen said was true. Even if Xiao Chen used the space compass to escape, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, and the other Sword Sect experts would definitely die here. If they lost Zhou Song and Wu Huan, these two End-Realm experts, the Hetian sect would definitely attack the Sword Sect. At that time, the result would still be the same. To put it bluntly, the Sword Sect wasn't strong enough to go against the Hetian sect. However, no matter what, Zhou Song and Wu Huan both hoped that Xiao Chen could leave first. After all, only by surviving would there be hope. Moreover, one couldn't forget that Xiao Chen was Jun Wuya's last disciple. Facing such a desperate situation, Jun Wuya definitely wouldn't sit still and do nothing. Hearing Zhou Song and Wu Huan's words, Paxia laughed coldly. Emperor? Haha, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, haven't you heard of the saying, distant water can't put out a nearby fire? Jun Wuya hadn't appeared in the world for many years, and no one knew where he was. As such, Paxia didn't think that Jun Wuya could resolve the Sword Sect's crisis. The Hetian sect knew that Xiao Chen was Jun Wuya's disciple, but so what? When Jun Wuya rushed back, everything would probably be over. At that time, if Jun Wuya wanted to take revenge for Xiao Chen, the Hetian sect wouldn't be afraid. After all, they weren't pushovers. From Paxia's words, it seemed like he didn't care about Jun Wuya at all. However, just as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura suddenly appeared. Then, in the courtyard that was already in a mess, an illusory figure appeared. He had white hair and a youthful face, and he wore a gray sackcloth. Along with the appearance of this illusory figure, whether it was the experts of the Hetian sect or Xiao Chen and the others, they were all stunned. The person who came wasn't anyone else, it was Jun Wuya. When Jun Wuya appeared, he looked indifferently at Paxia and said, "Kid, you're quite arrogant. You? Emperor. Upon seeing Jun Wuya, Paxia and the other experts of the Hetian sect were stunned. Then, they unconsciously stopped what they were doing. Although Paxia's words sounded like he didn't care about Jun Wuya at all, that was when Jun Wuya wasn't around. Now that Jun Wuya had appeared, even if Paxia had 100 guts, he would never dare to say such words again. Emperor, the #1 expert of the Great Thousand Worlds, wasn't something that could be casually said. Not to mention Paxia, even the Hetian sect leader, who was at the same level as Jun Wuya, wouldn't dare to speak carelessly in front of Jun Wuya. Indeed, when Jun Wuya became famous, Paxia was still a kid. They didn't expect Jun Wuya to suddenly appear. Paxia and the others were stunned. On the other hand, when Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Xiao Chen saw Jun Wuya, they couldn't help but reveal a look of excitement. This was especially true for Zhou Song and Wu Huan. The two of them hadn't seen Jun Wuya for many years. Now that they saw Jun Wuya again, although it was just an illusion, the two of them were still very excited. They immediately bowed respectfully to Jun Wuya and said, "Disciple greets master." Facing their greetings, Jun Wuya nodded slightly. However, his gaze turned to Xiao Chen and a gentle smile flashed across his eyes. "Disciple, you still underestimated your enemy. That's why you're in such a predicament." Jun Wuya's words clearly contained a trace of blame. In Jun Wuya's opinion, the reason why Xiao Chen was in such a predicament was because he had underestimated the Hetian sect. He always felt that the Hetian sect wouldn't act against the sword sect so quickly. Therefore, Xiao Chen didn't make enough preparations for this sixth disabled sect assembly. Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Xiao Chen didn't refute. He nodded slightly and said, "Master is right. What Jun Wuya said was the truth." Xiao Chen couldn't refute it. This time, he had indeed underestimated his enemy. Hearing the conversation between Jun Wuya and Xiao Chen, Passia and the others frowned slightly. However, soon, one of them said coldly, "Jun Wuya is just an illusion. Sovereign Emperor is just a phantom. Don't worry about him. Kill." Jun Wuya's appearance was indeed unexpected to the experts of the Hetian sect. However, this alone wasn't enough to make them retreat. It wasn't his true body that had come. It was just an avatar. Hearing this person's words, the killing intent in the eyes of Passia and the others gathered again. Jun Wuya's true body wasn't here. Since that was the case, they must kill Xiao Chen today. Hearing the words of the expert from the Hetian sect, Jun Wuya smiled faintly and said, "Even if this old man is only an avatar, it's enough to protect my disciple." They thought that since Jun Wuya was only an avatar, they didn't need to be too afraid. However, Passia and the others obviously didn't know that Jun Wuya's strength had already exceeded their understanding. Jun Wuya had never appeared in the vast thousand worlds after traveling for so many years, so it was impossible that his strength had not improved at all. On the contrary, Jun Wuya's strength had improved a lot during these years of traveling. As such, even if it was only a doppelganger of his spiritual soul that had descended, Jun Wuya still had the ability to protect Xiao Chen and the others. As soon as his voice fell, without waiting for Passia and the others to reply, Jun Wuya formed a seal with his hands. At the same time, a space crack slowly tore open in the courtyard. This space crack was different from an ordinary space crack. It was a void passage. Jun Wuya used his own strength to open up a space crack. Seeing Jun Wuya's actions, Passia and the others were stunned. Then, they all spoke in disbelief. The perfect realm of the law of space, Jun Wuya had comprehended the law of space, and he had even comprehended it to the great perfection realm. Passia and the others were stunned when they saw the scene before them. At the same time, Jun Wuya said to Xiao Chen faintly, "Go." This space crack led directly to the sword sect. As long as they returned to the sword sect, Xiao Chen would have a way to deal with the Hetian sect. Upon hearing Jun Wuya's words, Xiao Chen was stunned. Then, he looked at Jun Wuya and said, "Master, when will you be back?" Xiao Chen wanted Jun Wuya to return to the sword sect as soon as possible because as long as Jun Wuya joined, the sword sect would have the possibility of becoming one of the 10 great Lingtian sects. Moreover, if Jun Wuya joined, the pressure on Xiao Chen would naturally be reduced by a lot. Xiao Chen was not the only one who hoped that Jun Wuya would return as soon as possible. Upon hearing this, Zhou Song and Wu Huan also looked at Jun Wuya expectantly. Unfortunately, under the gazes of the three people, Jun Wuya scolded jokingly. "What? You can't take it anymore and want this old man to come back and clean up the mess for you?" When Xiao Chen requested to return to the great wide world, Jun Wuya teased him. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen curled his lips helplessly. Indeed, he couldn't take it anymore. Seeing that Xiao Chen didn't answer, Jun Wuya also smiled and said, "In 100 years, I will return to the great wide world." "All right, enough nonsense. Let's go. Chapter 2009. Xiao Qin wanted Jun Wuya to return as soon as possible. After all, if Jun Wuya was in the Sword Sect, then the Sword Sect would no longer fear the Hetian Sect. Unfortunately, Jun Wuya didn't give a clear answer to Xiao Qin's thoughts. However, the good thing was that Jun Wuya didn't refuse. Hearing Xiao Qin and Jun Wuya's words, Zhou Song and Wu Huan were both excited. After all, Jun Wuya didn't refuse, which proved that Jun Wuya might really choose to join the Sword Sect. It was just that the timing wasn't certain. Zhou Song and Wu Huan naturally understood their master very well. Since he didn't refuse, it meant that Jun Wuyuan didn't have much resistance to joining the Sword Sect. How could Zhou Song and Wu Huan not be excited to be able to join the same sect as their master? After all, this had always been their wish. While they were excited, they were also shocked. From Jun Wuya's words and actions, it wasn't difficult to see how much importance Jun Wuya attached to Xiao Qin. Compared to the 4 unnamed disciples, Xiao Qin's importance in Jun Wuya's heart couldn't be compared. From the moment he appeared until now, Jun Wuya had only nodded to the 2 of them. After that, he had been talking to Xiao Qin. They didn't doubt Xiao Qin's identity, but after seeing Jun Wuya, Zhou Song and Wu Huan realized how much importance their master attached to Xiao Qin, as expected of his last disciple. While the 2 of them were still in shock, Jun Wuya turned to look at them and said calmly, "Zhou Song, Wu Huan, the 2 of you must protect junior brother well." "Yes, master," Jun Wuya instructed the 2 of them. Hearing this, Zhou Song and Wu Huan respectfully saluted. It should have been a situation of certain death, but with the appearance of Jun Wuya, the crisis seemed to have been resolved just like that. After saying that, Jun Wuya motioned for everyone to quickly enter his spatial tunnel. Seeing that Xiao Qin and the others were about to leave, Passia and the other Heavenly Sect experts naturally wouldn't agree. In order to kill them this time, the Heavenly Sect had made all the preparations. They didn't even hesitate to send 5 End Realm experts. 5 End Realm experts tried to kill Xiao Qin, but who knew that at the last moment, Xiao Qin would actually flee. This was something that the people of Jointian Sect couldn't accept. Thus, seeing that Xiao Qin and the others were about to leave, Passia immediately shouted, "Stop them, Jun Wuya is just a soul clone, don't be afraid." Jun Wuya was just a soul clone, so Passia didn't care too much. If Jun Wuya's main body came, then Passia and the others would have fled long ago. After all, there was a limit to the power of a soul clone. Moreover, this was the best chance to kill Xiao Qin, so Passia and the others decided to go all out. Hearing Passia's words, the heaven-joining sect experts all charged towards Xiao Qin and the others. Seeing this, Jun Wuya scoffed coldly. "You don't know your place." As he said that, Jun Wuya waved his hand, and a golden light seemed to tear through the night sky, covering everyone. Anyone that was hit by the golden light was instantly pierced with numerous bloody holes. The golden light was like many sharp thorns, directly piercing through everyone's bodies. Jun Wuya's soul clone did descend, but with Jun Wuya's strength, it wasn't impossible for him to protect Xiao Qin and the others and leave. As Jun Wuya attacked, the heaven-joining sect experts fell one by one. Only Passia and the others were able to block Jun Wuya's attack. However, even if the 5 of them had the ability to block the golden light, they were still shocked by this scene. One must know that the one in front of them was just a soul clone of Jun Wuya, and its combat strength was far from the main body. Even so, Jun Wuya heavily injured everyone from the heaven-joining sect in one move. Even Dao Realm experts didn't have much ability to fight back in front of Jun Wuya. This is the strength of the number 1 expert of the Great Thousand Worlds? An End Realm expert from the heaven-joining sect couldn't help but mutter softly. A mere soul clone had such strength. If Jun Wuya's main body descended, then none of the heaven-joining sect experts present would be able to leave, including Passia and the other End Realm experts. They were already doubting whether the sect leader of the heaven-joining sect, who was said to be on the same level as Junwuya, was really a match for Junwuya? He hadn't appeared in the Great Thousand Worlds for so many years, so what realm had Junwuya's strength reached? They were shocked, but taking advantage of Junwuya's attack, Xiao Chen and the others all entered the space that Junwuya opened and disappeared. After waiting for Xiao Chen and the others to enter the space tunnel, Junwuya also closed the entrance, and everything returned to normal. Apart from the courtyard and in that were completely destroyed due to the battle, there was nothing else. After safely sending off Xiao Chen and the others, Junwuya looked at Pasye and the others calmly. There was no anger in his eyes, no sadness or joy, as if he was looking at a group of ants. Facing Junwuya's gaze, Pasye and the others' hearts sank, afraid that Junwuya would attack again. Although they were only facing a soul clone of Junwuya, after what happened just now, Pasye and the others were already terrified of Junwuya, even if it was just a soul clone. Fortunately, Junwuya didn't continue to attack. His originally illusory figure slowly dissipated and disappeared into the air. It wasn't until Junwuya completely disappeared that Pasye and the others secretly breathed a sigh of relief. But soon, the five of them revealed a look of unwillingness. This time, they could have killed Xiao Chen in one fell swoop, but who would have thought that at the last moment, Junwuya would appear and save Xiao Chen and the others? They had prepared for so long and mobilized so many experts, but in the end, it ended in failure. If this was all, it wouldn't be a big deal, but after this incident, Pasye and the others were very clear that it would be very difficult to find such an opportunity again in the future. After all, after this incident, Xiao Chen would definitely pay more attention to his own safety in the future. As a result, it would be almost impossible to find an opportunity to kill Xiao Chen again. Damn it! Pasye cursed angrily, but even if he was unwilling, what could he do? Hearing this, Pasye took a deep breath and said helplessly, "Let's go. Man proposes, God disposes. This time there is no chance. Let's go back first." As he spoke, Pasye glanced at the surrounding experts from the United Heaven sect. Many of them had been severely injured by Junwuya's one move. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 2010. Hundreds of Heavenly Sect experts were heavily injured in just one move. The Comprehension Realm and Tao Realm experts were still okay as none of them died. However, more than half of the Celestial Emperor Realm experts were directly killed. Hundreds of Heavenly Sect experts were heavily injured in just one move. The Comprehension Realm and Tao Realm experts were still okay as none of them died. However, more than half of the Celestial Emperor Realm experts were directly killed. A single Divine Soul Avatar was able to kill so many people in a single move. This caused Pasye to be extremely shocked. It was hard to imagine how strong Junwuya was. Also, if Junwuya really joined the Sword Sect, could the Heavenly Sect compete with the Sword Sect? Not to mention other things, but who would stop Junwuya then? Would they rely on the Heavenly Sect leader? Although the Heavenly Sect leader was an existence that surpassed the End Realm, Pasye wasn't confident at all. He didn't know whether or not the Heavenly Sect leader could stop Junwuya. If he couldn't, then the outcome would be catastrophic. Shock, fear, but very quickly, Pasye revealed a vicious expression. No, we have to quickly wipe out the Sword Sect. Junwuya definitely wasn't in the Great Thousand World. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be a soul clone. So, they had to take down the Sword Sect before Junwuya returned to the Sword Sect. Junwuya's strength covered Pasye's heart, but at the same time, it strengthened his determination to quickly wipe out the Sword Sect. He had to get rid of the Sword Sect before Junwuya returned to the Great Thousand World. He couldn't give the Sword Sect any more chances. Pasye thought to himself. Not only Pasye, but the other 4 End Realm experts also thought the same. They exchanged glances with one another, and then one of them said, let's go back first. The encirclement this time had failed at the last step, and they could only choose to retreat for the time being. Hearing this, the other four nodded slightly. The experts of the Katian sect left. On the other side, with Jun Wuya's help, Xiao Chen's group safely returned to the sword sect. However, Song Xing and the others were shocked when they saw that they were all injured. He told Song Xing and the others what had happened. When they heard that Xiao Chen and the others were besieged by the Coiling Heaven sect, everyone frowned. The sudden attack from the Coiling Heaven sect had indeed caused everyone to feel heavy-hearted. It could not be helped as the Sword sect was still no match for the Coiling Heaven sect, one of the 10 great Ling Tian sects. If the Coiling Heaven sect really did not dare to attack the Sword sect, then the Sword sect would indeed have a hard time defending themselves. They originally thought that the Coiling Heaven sect would not attack the Sword sect so quickly, but now it seemed like everyone was wrong. Or rather, everyone had underestimated the fear that the Coiling Heaven sect had towards the Sword sect. It was because of this deep fear towards the Sword sect that the Coiling Heaven sect wanted to destroy the Sword sect as quickly as possible. As such, everything else could be temporarily put aside. In the main hall, Xiao Chen sat on the main seat and looked at the people below. After a moment of silence, he said, "This time, although Master has made a move and foiled the Coiling Heaven sect's scheme, I believe that the Coiling Heaven sect will not let this matter rest." After this incident, Xiao Chen completely understood a problem. To the Coiling Heaven sect, destroying the Sword sect was the most important thing right now. As such, although the encirclement of the Coiling Heaven sect this time ended in failure, it would not be long before they would definitely make a comeback. At that time, it would definitely not be so easy to defeat them. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Song Xing, and the others who were present nodded slightly. They did not doubt Xiao Chen's words because the Coiling Heaven sect's large-scale attack was already inevitable. Now, the Sword sect was faced with how to deal with the Coiling Heaven sect's upcoming attack and how to block the numerous experts from the Coiling Heaven sect. In terms of strength, the Sword sect was obviously not as strong as the Coiling Heaven sect. Therefore, it was almost impossible for them to block the Coiling Heaven sect. Their own strength was not enough to go against the Coiling Heaven sect. As such, they could only think of a way to seek external help. Their opponent was the Coiling Heaven sect. Obviously, ordinary forces did not dare to be enemies with them. If they wanted to seek external help, they could only look for the other forces that were also part of the 10 great Lingtian sect. This was because only they had the capital to not fear the Coiling Heaven sect. Xiao Chen already had a rough plan in his heart. However, it was only a thought. Xiao Chen still needed to think about the specifics. Looking at the solemn faces of Zhou Song and the others, Xiao Chen helplessly smiled bitterly and said, "All right, even if the Coiling Heaven sect wants to come, they can't come just because they want to. We still have time to prepare. Let's go and rest first." Song Xing was fine, but Xiao Chen, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Long Qing, and Xianyuan Ling were all injured. Therefore, Xiao Chen also asked everyone to go and rest. After leaving the hall one after another, Xiao Chen returned to his dwelling. His injuries were nothing special. After ingesting healing pills, he only needed to rest for a few days and he would be fine. What truly left Xiao Chen helpless was still the matter of the Coiling Heaven sect. Just as Xiao Chen was thinking about how to deal with the Coiling Heaven sect, on the other side, in the Dragon Province that was extremely far away from the Sword Province. The Dragon Province was a province, but basically 80% of its area was covered by the ocean. As for the land, it was only a series of small islands. At the bottom of the sea in the Dragon Province there was a majestic palace. This was where the Dragon Palace was located, as well as the headquarters of the Dragon Clan. The Dragon Palace was also one of the 10 great Lingtian sects of the Great Wide World, and it was a powerful, established organization. In terms of heritage, probably even the Sword sect at its peak could not compare to it. At this moment, a middle-aged man sat on the main seat in the hall of the Dragon Palace. Below him was an old man. Looking at the old man, the middle-aged man said indifferently, "Are you sure? The ancestor has specially asked about this." The middle-aged man was the current palace master of the Dragon Palace, as well as the clan leader of the Dragon Clan. In response to his question, the old man below him replied respectfully, "It's been confirmed." There were many people present at the time, including Taoist Bai Song, He Sui, Ba Ling, and so on. They can all confirm that it's the bloodline of the ancestral dragon. During the Great Assembly of the Six Sects, Long Qing had displayed the bloodline of the ancestral dragon, so naturally, the news had reached the ears of the Dragon Palace. The ancestor of the Dragon Palace, the ancestral dragon, immediately ordered the current palace master of the Dragon Palace, the middle-aged man, to investigate the matter thoroughly after hearing the news. If it was true, he was to bring Long Qing back. Hearing the old man's reply, the middle-aged man pondered for a moment before speaking. "If that's the case, take some people to the Sword Sect and bring the little girl back. The ancestor wants to see her." It was actually not strange that the Dragon Palace wanted to bring Long Qing back. After all, the bloodline of the ancestral dragon was very precious. Since it had appeared, the Dragon Palace obviously would not stand idly by. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the old man nodded respectfully and replied, "Yes. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2011. The Dragon Palace had started to notice Long Qing and was prepared to send people to bring Long Qing back. However, Xiao Qin and the others didn't know about this yet. Xiao Qin and the higher-ups of the Sword Sect were all focused on dealing with the Hetian Sect. They all knew that the Hetian Sect was bound to attack the Sword Sect. What the Sword Sect had to face was the threat from the Hetian Sect. After a few days of rest, Xiao Qin's injuries were more or less healed. On this day, in the main hall of the Sword Sect, Xiao Qin, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Song Xing, and He Xin gathered together to discuss how to deal with the Hetian Sect. The Sword Sect's strength alone wasn't enough to deal with the Hetian Sect. Even if the sect leader of the Hetian Sect was in seclusion, the Sword Sect was still their opponent. This was because in terms of the number of End Realm experts on both sides, the Hetian Sect had more than the Sword Sect. Their strength wasn't on the same level. In this way, if the Sword Sect wanted to deal with the Hetian Sect's attack, they had to find a way to rope in external help. The best person that Xiao Qin could think of was the Moon Palace. As one of the top 10 Lingtian sects, the Moon Palace wasn't any weaker than the Hetian Sect. Therefore, with the help of the Moon Palace, the Sword Sect had the ability to fight with the Hetian Sect. Of course, Xiao Qin also knew that it was impossible for the Moon Palace to fight to the death with the Hetian Sect. Although the Moon Palace had the intention of building a good relationship with the Sword Sect in the Dan Valley, it was impossible for the Moon Palace to fight to the death with the Hetian Sect for the Sword Sect. Xiao Qin was very clear about this point. Therefore, Xiao Qin's goal was only to hope that the Moon Palace could help to restrain a portion of the Hetian Sect's strength. As long as the Moon Palace could restrain a portion of the Hetian Sect's strength, the Sword Sect would have the power to fight against the Hetian Sect's attack. The most important thing was to rely on oneself. The Lunar Palace could only lend a hand. Xiao Qin explained his idea to everyone present. After hearing what Xiao Qin said, Song Xing and the others had no objections. After all, this was the best solution at the moment. He hoped that the Moon Palace would lend a hand. Of course, with the relationship between the Sword Sect and the Moon Palace, and the fact that Xiao Xiao was the holy maiden of the Moon Palace, it was not impossible for the Moon Palace to act to restrain a portion of the Heavenly Sect's forces. No one objected. Now they needed to send people to the Moon Palace. Looking at everyone, Xiao Qin asked, "Who is willing to go to the Moon Palace?" "I'll go." Zhou Song took the initiative to answer Xiao Qin's question. If one were to ask who was most familiar with the Moon Palace, it would undoubtedly be Zhou Song. Moreover, Zhou Song was Xiao Zhao's second senior brother. He was indeed the most suitable person to go to the Moon Palace. Hearing Zhou Song's words, Xiao Qin nodded and said, "In that case, I'll have to trouble second senior brother to make the trip." Whether or not they could obtain the help of the Moon Palace was too important for the Sword Sect. They could not afford to be careless. Therefore, Xiao Qin attached great importance to this matter. After settling the matter, Zhou Song set off for the Moon Palace on the same day. Zhou Song left. 3 days after Zhou Song left for the Moon Palace, the people from the Dragon Palace also arrived at the Sword Sect. Hearing that the people from the Dragon Palace had come to the Sword Sect, Xiao Qin was stunned at first. However, he quickly guessed their purpose. It should be because of Long Qing. After all, the Sword Sect and the Dragon Palace had no relationship. Now that the people from the Dragon Palace had taken the initiative to visit, the only possibility was that they were here for Long Qing. Perhaps during the Sixth Sect Conference, Long Qing had revealed the ancestral dragon bloodline and attracted the attention of the Dragon Palace. In the main hall, Xiao Qin met the elder of the Dragon Palace, named Long Shan. In the main hall, Long Shan looked at Xiao Qin, who was sitting on the main seat, and directly stated his purpose. "Sect Master Xiao Qin, this old man is here for Long Qing. I wonder if you can let Long Qing show herself." Long Shan was obviously not interested in other matters. This time, he was ordered to come to the Sword Sect. His only purpose was to bring Long Qing back to the Dragon Palace. Moreover, this was an order from the ancestor. Long Shan did not dare to be careless. Hearing Long Shan's words, although Xiao Qin had some guesses in his heart, he still frowned and asked, "Why does the Dragon Palace want to see my second sister?" Although he had guessed beforehand that Long Shan must have come for Long Qing, Xiao Qin still asked when he heard that Long Shan really came for Long Qing. Long Qing was originally a pure-blood dragon, and now she had the ancestral dragon bloodline. Logically speaking, the Dragon Palace should not harm Long Qing. After all, the Dragon Clan attached great importance to the power of the bloodline. As a member of the Dragon Clan, the Dragon Palace should be of the same clan to Long Qing. Generally, the Dragon Clan would not kill each other. However, there were exceptions to everything. Therefore, Xiao Qin could not really relax before he knew the real intention of the Dragon Palace. In the face of Xiao Qin's questions and worries, Long Shan did not hide anything. He immediately told Xiao Qin that the ancestor of the Dragon Clan wanted to see Long Qing. "Sect leader Xiao Qin, please rest assured. The Dragon Palace has no evil intentions towards Long Qing. It is just that the ancestor wants to see her. As for the reason, I think Xiao Qin can guess it. It is really because Long Qing has the ancestral dragon bloodline. Because Long Qing had the ancestral dragon bloodline, the ancestor of the Dragon Clan wanted to see her. Therefore, Long Shan came to the Sword Sect personally." Xiao Qin did not have any doubts about Long Shan's words. However, after a moment of silence, Xiao Qin cautiously said, "How about this? Second sister is now in seclusion. Elder Long Shan can rest in the Sword Sect for a night. Tomorrow, I will let second sister meet Elder Long Shan in person. What do you think?" Xiao Qin did not directly agree with Long Shan. This matter still needed to be discussed with Long Qing. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, Long Shan hesitated for a moment, then nodded and agreed. Logically speaking, the strength of the Dragon Palace was stronger than the Heavenly Sect. They were not afraid of the Sword Sect at all. However, Long Shan's attitude towards Xiao Qin was very polite. He did not have any intention of oppressing others because of the strength of the Dragon Palace. Judging from Long Shan's attitude, Xiao Qin could feel that the Dragon Palace did not have any malicious intentions towards Long Qing. Moreover, what Xiao Qin did not know was that before coming, the palace master of the Dragon Palace, had specially reminded Long Shan to be polite when he went to the sword sect to bring Long Qing back. This was because the ancestor seemed to have the intention of accepting Long Qing as a disciple. He could not offend Long Qing casually. The ancestor of the Dragon Clan wanted to accept Long Qing as a disciple. In this way, Long Qing's status in the Dragon Palace would naturally be different in the future. Therefore, Long Shan was very clear that even though the Dragon Palace was much stronger than the Sword Sect, he could not offend them. Xiao Chen hoped that Long Shan would wait for a day. Regarding this, Long Shan readily agreed. Then, he personally arranged a residence for Long Shan. Xiao Chen then returned to his cave residence, ready to discuss with Long Qing. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 2012. In the cave residence, Xiao Chen, Long Qing, and Xianyuan Ling sat together and told them about the people from Dragon Palace. Then, Xiao Chen looked at Long Qing, obviously waiting for her reply. Although he did not feel any hostility from Long Qing, this matter ultimately depended on Long Qing. If Long Qing did not want to go to Dragon Palace, then Xiao Chen would definitely not agree. Even though Dragon Palace was stronger than Hetian's sect, Xiao Chen would never betray his sister in exchange for He Ping. Facing Xiao Chen's gaze, Long Qing hesitated for a moment and then said, "I'll go." Dragon Palace took the initiative to send people to find her. Long Qing did not hesitate too much and decided to go back to Dragon Palace with Long Shan. The main reason why she agreed so quickly was that Long Qing still wanted to improve her strength. Unlike Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing only received the ancestral dragon bloodline from Junwia, but Xianyuan Ling received a complete set of the reincarnation emperor's legacy. In this way, even if Xianyuan Ling stayed in the sword sect to practice, there would be no problem. Because of the complete legacy of the reincarnation emperor, Xianyuan Ling did not need anyone to teach him at all. In fact, no one could teach him. As long as he had enough practice resources, Xianyuan Ling could practice according to the legacy of the reincarnation emperor. Long Qing was different. Junwia only gave her the ancestral dragon bloodline. As for how to stimulate or enhance the power of the ancestral dragon bloodline in her body, Long Qing did not know at all. Not to mention Long Qing, even Junwia did not know much about it. Therefore, compared to Xianyuan Ling, if Long Qing practiced by herself, it was obviously much more difficult. Especially recently, Long Qing clearly felt that she had fallen into a bottleneck and her practice speed had gradually slowed down. If this continued, Long Qing was very clear that it would not be long before she was completely separated from Xianyuan Ling and Xiao Chen. Therefore, in order to obtain more strength, Long Qing did not hesitate too much and made a decision. Hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chen and Xianyuan Ling looked at each other and then nodded slightly. Xiao Chen and Xianyuan Ling were not surprised by Long Qing's decision. It was because they guessed that Long Qing was likely to agree that Xiao Chen did not reject Long Qing on the spot. Now it seemed that their thoughts were the same. With a sigh, Xiao Chen turned to Long Qing and said, "Since second sister has already made a decision, I have no objections. However, second sister, you must be careful when you go to the Dragon Clan." Long Qing had made a decision and Xiao Chen had no reason to refuse. Moreover, Xiao Chen and his siblings had been together for so many years. It was not the first time that they had parted like this. Besides their own safety, there was nothing else to say. Besides, Long Qing going to the Dragon Palace did not mean that they would not see each other in the future. On the contrary, if Long Qing was really accepted as a disciple by the ancestor of the Dragon Palace, it would be a good thing for the Sword Sect. Because at that time, with Long Qing's relationship, the Sword Sect and the Dragon Palace could obviously establish a connection. With the help of the Dragon Palace and the Moon Palace, the Sword Sect would no longer be afraid of the Hetian sect. In other words, the Hutian sect would have to think twice before making a move on the sword sect. Being able to rope in the Dragon Palace was obviously a piece of good news for the Swords Gate. The decision was quickly made. However, Xiao Chun and the other two got together and had a good drink. The next morning, Xiao Chun, Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling went to Long Shan's residence together. Seeing Long Qing, Long Shan's attitude was very respectful. It seemed that the Dragon Palace really attached great importance to Long Qing. Xiao Chun and Xianyuan Ling were naturally satisfied. After all, the more importance the Dragon Palace attached to Long Qing, the safer Long Qing would be after going to the Dragon Palace. Of course, for Long Qing's safety, Xiao Chun also made a lot of preparations. Last night, Xiao Chun took out a lot of life-saving items from the treasure house of the Sword Sect and gave them to Long Qing to ensure that Long Qing could cope with some dangerous situations. Needless to say, the elixirs and talismans, Xiao Chun even gave Long Qing a space compass and asked her to keep it with her. If anything happened, she could use it directly and return to the Sword Sect. With the space compass, except for the ancestor of the dragon tribe, almost no one could threaten Long Qing's safety. Therefore, Xiao Chun and Xianyuan Ling were a little relieved. At this time, everyone took their seats one after another. Long Shan's attention was naturally on Long Qing. He already knew the answer from Xiao Chun, but at this time, Long Shan still looked at Long Qing and asked, "Have you really decided to go to the Dragon Palace with me?" Long San still wanted to confirm the answer from Long Qing. Hearing this, Long Qing nodded and said, "Yes." Long Qing had indeed made the decision to go to the Dragon Palace. Hearing this, Long Shan smiled slightly and then exchanged some pleasantries with Xiao Chun. Then, he was ready to take Long Qing to the Dragon Palace today. Xiao Chun and Xianyuan Ling had no objection to this, and so did Long Qing. After a few simple words, Long Qing was led away by Long Shan. Before leaving, Xiao Chun reminded Long Qing again. "Second sister, be careful in the Dragon Palace. If there is anything, contact me. Big brother and I will be there as soon as possible." The only thing Xiao Chun was worried about was Long Qing's safety. It was not difficult to see from Long Shan's attitude that the ancestor of the Dragon Palace should have no evil intentions towards Long Qing. Otherwise, with the strength of the old dragon, he could directly destroy the Sword Sect. There was no need for him to take so many detours. However, who could guarantee that the others in the Dragon Palace did not have any evil intentions? Therefore, it was always right to be careful. Hearing Xiao Chen's reminder, Long Qing nodded and replied, "Little brother, don't worry. I will be careful." After saying this, Long Qing left the Sword Sect under Long Shan's lead. Seeing that everyone was completely gone, Xiao Chun and Xianyuan Ling turned around and returned. Long Qing going to the Dragon Palace was probably a good thing for her. Of course, it was also the same for the Sword Sect. As long as Long Qing successfully gained a foothold in the Dragon Palace, the Sword Sect and the Dragon Palace would naturally be able to establish some connections. Just as Long Qing was taken away by the experts of the Dragon Palace, on the other side, in the main hall of the Heavenly Sect, the End Realm experts of the Heavenly Sect gathered together again. However, compared to the last time, the expressions of the End Realm experts of the Heavenly Sect were very serious this time. They originally thought that the last assassination attempt would be a sure thing, but who would have thought that it would end in failure? This was something that no one had expected. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 2013. A group of End Realm experts from the Katian sect sat in the main hall with a solemn expression on their faces. The failure of the last assassination attempt had undoubtedly made the Katian sect fear the Sword Sect even more. The sect leader of the Katian sect still hadn't come out of seclusion. For experts of their level, it was normal for them to be in seclusion for decades or even centuries. Hence, if they wanted to deal with the sword sect, they obviously couldn't rely on the sect leader of the Katian sect. They gathered once again, and one of the End Realm experts spoke first. Junwuya has appeared. Looking at the current situation, it is only a matter of time before he joins the sword sect. If Junwuya joins the sword sect, I think all of you should be clear about what this means to the Katian sect. Hearing this End Realm expert's words, the others all nodded their heads solemnly. Indeed, from Junwuya's appearance this time and saving Xiao Qin and the others, Junwuya's importance to Xiao Qin was far from what Zhou Song and the other disciples could compare to. And with Junwuya's importance to Xiao Qin, if Xiao Qin asked Junwuya to join the sword sect, Junwuya would most likely agree. At that time, the sword sect would have Junwuya and would have the ability to become one of the top 10 Lingtian sect. And looking at the current situation, the Katian sect was undoubtedly the best target. As for why the sword sect would choose the Katian sect, firstly, it was because of the enmity between the two sections. Secondly, it was because the Katian sect's strength was at the bottom of the top 10 Lingtian sects. Since they wanted to become one of the top 10 Lingtian sects, the sword sect would definitely choose a weaker opponent. They couldn't directly challenge an old Lingtian sect like the Dragon Palace. Hence, there was an 80% chance that the sword sect would choose the Katian sect. He could not allow the sword sect to have a chance to rise. Otherwise, when Junwuya returned to the Great Thousand World, the heavenly sect would be in danger. The threat from the sword sect could no longer be ignored. At the same time, they had no choice but to deal with it. Everyone agreed with this person's words. However, immediately after, someone else spoke up. Where's the sovereign? Shouldn't we inform the sect master and take down the sword sect in one fell swoop? The sect master of the heavenly sect was in seclusion. Originally, according to everyone present, there was no need for the sect master to deal with the current sword sect. But now, it seemed that they had no choice but to inform the sect master. When he heard this, the End Realm expert who spoke first nodded. I have informed the sect leader, but I haven't gotten a reply. He had already informed the sect leader of the Katian sect about this matter, but it was hard to say what the exact reply would be. He could only wait. At the same time, he had to make a decision about the sword sect. If the sect leader couldn't come out of seclusion, then with the strength of the Katian sect, if they used all their strength to deal with the sword sect, they might be able to destroy the sword sect. Of course, if that was the case, the Katian sect would have to pay a price. However, compared to the threat of the sword sect, this price wasn't worth mentioning. The sect leader still needed to wait for a reply. Seeing this, Passia opened his mouth. I think that we should immediately attack the sword sect and go all out. We can temporarily put aside everything else and focus all our strength to destroy the sword sect in one fell swoop. Passia's meaning was to directly attack the sword sect and focus all their strength to destroy the sword sect. They would destroy the threat from the sword sect in the cradle. Hearing Passia's words, the other Katian sect experts all exchanged glances with one another before nodding their heads. I agree. I agree too. Everyone agreed to use all the strength of the Katian sect to destroy the sword sect in one fell swoop. The sect leader was in seclusion, so all matters of the Katian sect were decided by the various End Realm experts. Today, everyone's opinions were surprisingly unanimous. Seeing this, the Grand Elder of the Katian sect opened his mouth. Since that is the case, then let's do it this way. Start to mobilize our strength and prepare to attack the sword sect. The sect leader of the Katian sect was in seclusion, so the Grand Elder was the strongest in the sect. Since the Grand Elder had spoken, no one present had any objections. The attack of the Katian sect would probably come faster than expected. At the same time, this time, the Katian sect could be said to be a direct attack on the sword sect. If the last attack was said to be a plot by the Katian sect, then this time, it was a true competition of strength. There weren't any tricks, both sides were competing in strength. At the same time, the Katian sect's intentions were clear for this attack on the Sword sect. They didn't want to use any useless plots and schemes. They were going to use absolute strength to suppress and destroy the Sword sect. Using true strength to win, this was the decision of the Katian sect. At this moment, within the main hall of the Katian sect, a full 15 End Realm experts all agreed to attack the Sword sect. A full 15 End Realm experts, this was the embodiment of the confidence and strength of the Katian sect as one of the top 10 Lingtian sects. One must know that the number of End Realm experts in Sword Gate was only 6. However, the number of End Realm experts in Sword Gate reached 15, more than double that of Sword Gate. Furthermore, in order to ensure that they could destroy the Sword sect in the shortest amount of time, without any more accidents, the Katian sect mobilized all their strength to deal with the Sword sect. As for other matters, the experts of the Katian sect had already decided to temporarily put them aside. Everything would wait until the Sword sect was destroyed. They had to cut off all means of retreat. They had to succeed in one strike. On the other side, Zhou Song, who had set off from the Sword sect and was rushing towards the Moon Palace, finally arrived at the Moon Palace. He first saw Xiao Xiao. As Zhou Song's senior brother, Xiao Xiao naturally chose to help without any hesitation after knowing the reason for his visit. However, even though Xiao Xiao was the saintess of the Moon Palace and had some say in this matter, she didn't have the right to decide. As for whether or not the Moon Palace was willing to help the Sword sect share a portion of the pressure from the Katian sect, it all depended on the Moon Palace master. Of course, Xiao Xiao had the ability to put in a few good words in front of the Moon Palace master, but it was hard to say now. She could only make a decision after meeting the Moon Palace master. Second senior brother, don't worry. I will definitely persuade master to agree, Xiao Xiao said as she sat together with Zhou Song. It was obvious that Zhou Song's mood was very heavy. After all, he wasn't confident. Hearing Xiao Xiao's words of comfort, Zhou Song nodded slightly and said, "Yes, senior brother knows, but the time, second senior brother, don't worry. I have already informed master. Second senior brother should be able to meet master tomorrow." Zhou Song was afraid that there wouldn't be enough time. Regarding this, Xiao Xiao said honestly, "Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2014. Zhou Song had successfully arrived at the Moon Palace, but he still needed to wait a day to see the Moon Palace master. Although Zhou Song was anxious, there was nothing he could do. After all, the Moon Palace master was an existence that surpassed the End Realm. She wasn't someone that could be easily seen. It could even be said that the reason he was able to see her so quickly was because of Xiao Xiao. If it wasn't for Xiao Xiao's help, Zhou Song probably wouldn't have been able to see the Moon Palace master. He patiently waited in the Moon Palace. At the same time, on the day Zhou Song arrived at the Moon Palace, the Heavenly Sect started to move. A large group of Heavenly Sect experts started to move towards the Sword Province. Xiao Chen, who had been paying close attention to the Heavenly Sect's actions, immediately received the news that the Heavenly Sect experts were moving towards the Sword Province. Within the main hall of the Sword Sect, Xiao Chen, Song Xing, Wu Huan, He Xin, and the others were gathered together. They had serious expressions as they discussed how to deal with the situation. The Heavenly Sect's actions undoubtedly showed that they were prepared to attack the Sword Sect. The attack came faster than expected. Xiao Chen had guessed that the Heavenly Sect would attack the Sword Sect, but he didn't expect it to come so quickly. The Sword Sect wasn't even prepared and the Heavenly Sect was already impatiently attacking. Zhou Song still hadn't sent any news, and they didn't know what the Moon Palace's attitude was. However, the Heavenly Sect's attack was about to arrive. This made Xiao Chen and the others feel unusually heavy. The Sword Sect definitely couldn't deal with the Heavenly Sect alone. If they wanted to deal with the Heavenly Sect, they had to rely on the Moon Palace's strength. At the very least, they needed the Moon Palace to restrict a portion of the Heavenly Sect's strength. They couldn't let the Heavenly Sect use all their strength to deal with the Moon Palace. Only then would the Sword Sect have a chance of winning. Looking at Song Xing and the others below, Xiao Chen said in a low voice, "Is there still no news from Zhou Song? Second senior brother has already arrived at the Moon Palace. He should be able to see the Moon Palace's palace master tomorrow." However, it's still hard to say what the Moon Palace's attitude is, Wu Wan replied after hearing Xiao Chen's words. News of Zhou Song's arrival in the Lunar Palace had already spread. However, as for whether the Lunar Palace was willing to help, Xiao Chen would have to wait until he met with the Lunar Palace's palace master the next day to find out. Hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded and didn't say anything else. Now, facing the large-scale attack of the Heavenly Sect, the only thing the Sword Sect could do was to place their hopes on Zhou Song. Hopefully, Zhou Song would be able to convince the Moon Palace. As long as the Moon Palace agreed to take action and restrain a portion of the Heavenly Gate's forces, then the Sword Sect would still have the strength to fight. Otherwise, with the strength of the Sword Sect, it was absolutely unrealistic and difficult to fight against the Heavenly Gate alone. After a night of silence, the Heavenly Gate still didn't stop their actions. On this night, Xiao Chen and the others were in a very heavy mood. As the darkness slowly receded, Zhou Song received news from Xiao Xiao early in the morning in the Moon Palace that his master had agreed to see him. After hearing this news, Zhou Song naturally didn't dare to delay in the slightest. He immediately set off for the main hall of the Moon Palace. After waiting for almost 2 hours outside the hall, Zhou Song finally met the palace master of the Moon Palace, who was also Xiao Zhao's master. After waiting for almost 2 hours, Zhou Song didn't have the slightest complaint. He was already very satisfied to be able to meet the palace master of the Moon Palace so quickly. In the main hall, Zhou Song, Xiao Xiao, Jiyin, and the palace master of the Moon Palace cupped their hands and bowed to the palace master of the Moon Palace, who was sitting on the main seat of the hall. Zhou Song greets the palace master of the Luo Xing Palace. The palace master of the Moon Palace was called Luo Xing. She was a peerlessly beautiful woman. In terms of appearance, Luo Xing could be said to be a first-class beauty. In the Great Thousand World, Luo Xing was the dream lover of countless experts. She wore a white gauze dress and sat elegantly on the main seat. Her beautiful eyes didn't reveal much emotion as she looked at Zhou Song indifferently. "Zhou Song, after not seeing you for so many years, I didn't expect you to give up the Tianjua sect and join the Sword Sect." Luo Xing had met Zhou Song before. Back then, when Zhou Song was cultivating with Junwia, Luo Xing had already met Zhou Song. Hearing Luo Xing's words, Zhou Song smiled bitterly. Others might not know, but Zhou Song knew a secret about Luo Xing. It was about the secret between her and Junwia. The #1 expert in the Great Thousand World and the #1 beauty in the Great Thousand World naturally interacted with each other. Furthermore, Luo Xing had always admired Junwia. Back then, Zhou Song was fortunate enough to be accepted as a disciple by Junwia and cultivated with Junwia. During those years, Luo Xing often came to look for Junwia. In Zhou Song's opinion, the reason why Luo Xing let Xiao Xiao become Junwia's disciple was probably a little selfish. Unfortunately, Junwia didn't accept Xiao Xiao in the end and only guided her in her cultivation for a period of time. Luo Xing's love for Junwia was something that even Zhou Song could see. Junwia naturally knew as well. However, Junwia didn't express anything about this and was indifferent to Luo Xing. In the end, the two didn't meet again after Junwia disappeared. Faced with Luo Xing's words, Zhou Song didn't know how to answer and could only choose to remain silent. Seeing that Zhou Song was silent, Luo Xing smiled faintly and said, "That's right. That old fellow isn't in the Great Thousand World now?" Needless to say, The old fellow that Luo Xing mentioned was naturally Junwei. She guessed that Junwei wasn't in the Great Thousand World. Otherwise, Zhou Song wouldn't have come to the Moon Palace to seek help. Hearing this, Zhou Song nodded honestly and admitted to Luo Xing's words. Seeing that Junwei was indeed not in the Great Thousand World, Luo Xing continued, "Your little junior brother is called Xiaochen, right? Is he really that old fellow's last disciple?" Luo Xing had heard a little about Xiaochen. Of course, this wasn't because Xiaochen had become the sect leader of the Sword Sect and attracted Luo Xing's attention. To put it bluntly, Luo Xing didn't care about the sect leader of the Sword Sect. The real reason why Luo Xing paid attention to Xiaochen was because of Junwei. This was because it was widely rumored that Xiaochen was Junwei's last disciple. Luo Xing knew that Junwei had never really accepted any disciples in his life. Nangong Guan, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Xiao Xiao actually didn't have a master-disciple relationship with Junwei. Junwei had never acknowledged the four of them as his disciples. However, Xiaochen was different. Xiaochen was the only disciple that Junwei acknowledged. This was the real reason why Luo Xing paid attention to Xiaochen. Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me. Chapter 2015. Xiaochen was the only disciple that Junwei acknowledged, and because of this, Luo Xing paid special attention to Xiaochen. After hearing Luo Xing's words, Zhou Song did not hide anything and nodded. Junior brother is indeed Master's last disciple. How can you be sure? Luo Xing asked with a smile. Although it was widely rumored that Xiaochen was Junwei's last disciple, no one could prove this point. Moreover, Junwei was not in the Great Thousand World at the moment. In response to Luo Xing's question, Zhou Song told Luo Xing about how Junwei had appeared to rescue them when they were besieged by the Heavenly Sect. Zhou Song, Wu Huan. Many people present at that time had seen Junwei, and they had also heard from Junwei that Xiaochen was his last disciple. Junwei's soul avatar had descended and saved Xiaochen and the others. Of course, the most important thing was to save Xiaochen. After hearing Zhou Song's words, a strange look flashed across Luo Xing's eyes, and he muttered softly. After so many years, you've finally found someone you like? After confirming the relationship between Xiaochen and Junwei, Luo Xing looked at Zhou Song and said, "The Heavenly Sect is preparing to attack the Sword Sect. Are you here to ask the Moon Palace to help the Sword Sect block the Heavenly Sect?" "No need, I only hope that the Moon Palace can help us contain a portion of the Heavenly Sect's forces," Zhou Song replied. When facing an expert at Luo Xing's level, it was obviously useless to bargain. It might even backfire on him. Therefore, Zhou Song directly stated the request in his heart. If the Moon Palace was asked to fight against the Heavenly Gate alone, the Moon Palace would not agree. After all, the Moon Palace did not want to see an all-out war with the Heavenly Gate. Although the Moon Palace was more powerful than the Fusion Heaven Sect, they were not so powerful that they could completely suppress the Fusion Heaven Sect. All in all, there might be differences in strength between the top 10 Ling Tian sects, but they were not so powerful that they could completely suppress the Fusion Heaven Sect. As a result, it was clearly impossible for the Moon Palace to deal with the Heavenly Fusion Sect alone. However, it was still possible to tie down a portion of the Heavenly Fusion Sect's forces. Sure enough, after hearing Zhou Song's words, a faint smile appeared on Luo Xing's face. He even praised with a smile, "Not bad. It seems that your sword sect isn't so stupid as to know what the bottom line is." Luo Xing's words were undoubtedly telling Zhou Song that it was impossible for the Moon Palace to deal with the Heavenly Fusion Sect alone. However, it was still possible to tie down a portion of the Heavenly Fusion Sect's forces or even most of their forces. As soon as he finished speaking, Luo Xing did not wait for Zhou Song's reply and immediately said, "All right, Go back and tell your junior brother that the Moon Palace will take action and tie down 70% of the Heavenly Fusion Sect's forces for the Sword Sect. I think you should be able to handle the remaining 30%. Luo Xing was very straightforward. Moreover, he immediately expressed that he was willing to tie down 70% of the Heavenly Fusion Sect's forces for the Sword Sect. In this way, the Sword Sect would only have to deal with 30% of the Heavenly Fusion Sect's forces. After hearing Luo Xing's words, Zhou Song secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to cup his fists and thank him, Luo Xing's figure had already disappeared when Zhou Song looked at the main seat of the high platform again. After successfully accomplishing the purpose of this trip, Zhou Song also secretly heaved a sigh of relief after receiving Luo Xing's reply. With the help of the Moon Palace, he should not have to worry about the following matters. Zhou Song and Xiao Xiao left the Moon Palace together and walked side by side. Xiao Xiao looked at Zhou Song and asked, "Second senior brother, are you planning to return to the Sword Sect?" "Yes, the Heavenly Fusion Sect has already made their move. Time is a little tight." Zhou Song nodded and replied without hiding anything. Zhou Song planned to leave immediately and return to the Sword Sect. Xiao Xiao did not stop him and only said with a smile, "Second senior brother, don't worry. There won't be any problems with the Moon Palace." Since Luo Xing had already agreed to the Sword Sect's request, the Moon Palace would definitely take action. Zhou Song was naturally not worried about the Moon Palace. After all, with Luo Xing's status, he would naturally not do anything that would go back on his word. Zhou Song directly left the Moon Palace. This trip to the Moon Palace seemed to be very smooth, but Zhou Song knew very well that all of this was actually because of Junhua. It was precisely because of the unclear relationship between Luo Xing and Junhua that Zhou Song did not spend much effort to persuade Luo Xing. Of course, this was also because Xiao Chun was Junhua's last disciple and also the sect leader of the Sword Sect. If Xiao Chun was not Junhua's last disciple or if Xiao Chun was not the sect leader of the Sword Sect, Luo Xing would probably not have agreed. After all, helping the Sword Sect to restrain 70% of the Heavenly Fusion Sect's strength was not beneficial to the Moon Palace. The Moon Palace had already agreed to join forces with the Sword Sect. At the same time, the various major forces in the Great Thousand World had also noticed the Heavenly Fusion Sect's actions. As the numerous powerhouses of the Heavenly Fusion Sect began to move towards the Sword Sect, many forces guessed that the Heavenly Fusion Sect was probably preparing to take action against the Sword Sect. Faced with such a situation, the various forces naturally paid close attention to it. After all, it had been many years since the 10 great Lingtian sects had made a move. To be able to become one of the 10 great Lingtian sects, one was already standing at the top of the Great Thousand World. As such, the 10 great Lingtian sects rarely made a move on normal days. This was because, other than each of them, other forces could hardly threaten them. After so many years, the 10 great Lingtian sects made a move once again. This naturally attracted the attention of the various major forces. At the same time, faced with the Heavenly Fusion Sect's actions, the various major forces guessed that the Heavenly Fusion Sect probably wanted to take down the Sword Sect in one fell swoop. Looking at how almost all of the powerhouses of the Heavenly Fusion Sect had moved out, it was obvious that they were staking everything on this one throw. Taiqing Temple. At this moment, Daoist Bai Song and a few other end-realm powerhouses of the Taiqing Temple were gathered in the main hall. Everyone was also discussing the matter of the Heavenly Fusion Sect attacking the Sword Sect. "It seems like the Sword Sect is in danger this time," one of them said plainly. He didn't have high hopes for the Sword Sect. After all, although the Sword Sect's momentum had been ferocious in recent years, it was still lacking compared to the Heavenly Fusion Sect, one of the 10 great Lingtian sects. There was no doubt about this. Hearing this person's words, Daoist Bai Song, who was sitting on the main seat, nodded slightly and said, "This time, if the Sword Sect doesn't have any special methods, it will probably be very difficult to stop the attack of the Heavenly Fusion sect. As he spoke, Taoist Bai Song looked out of the main hall. Then, he let out a breath of turbid air and said, "The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind." The rise of the Sword sect has made the Heavenly Fusion sect feel threatened. Therefore, they want to completely nip this threat in the bud. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2016. The rise of the Sword sect during this period of time was indeed unexpected. However, it was also because of the strong rise of the Sword sect that caused some subtle changes in the situation in the Great Thousand World. The rise of the Sword sect during this period of time was indeed unexpected. However, it was also because of the strong rise of the Sword sect that caused some subtle changes in the situation in the Great Thousand World. Although the impact was not great, it did make some forces feel threatened by the Sword sect. The Heavenly sect was one of them. It was because of this that the Heavenly sect could not wait to attack the Sword sect. They did not want to see the Sword sect truly rise. They had to nip the danger in the bud. There were actually many sects like the Heavenly sect. Not only were there many sects that did not want to see the rise of the Sword sect, but there were also superforces like the Taiching Temple and the Longhu sect. There were originally 5 superforces, but with the rise of the Sword sect, there were now 6. With one more force, the competition would be even more intense. Countless pairs of eyes were now staring at the Sword sect. They all wanted to see how the Sword sect would resist the ferocious Heavenly sect. In other words, they all wanted to see how the Sword sect would be destroyed. Faced with the attention of the various forces, Xiao Chen and the others in the Sword sect felt a lot more at ease. Although Zhou Song had not returned yet, he had already informed Xiao Chen and the others about the Moon Palace through a voice transmission talisman. Xiao Chen also secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that the Moon Palace had agreed to restrain 70% of the Heavenly sect's strength. If that was the case, then the Sword sect would indeed have the strength to fight. After all, they only needed to face 30% of the Heavenly sect's strength. With the current strength of the Sword sect, it was not impossible to fight. With confidence in his heart, Xiao Chen was no longer afraid of the Heavenly sect's attack. At the same time, many experts of the Heavenly sect had already gathered in the Ba prefecture, which was adjacent to the Sword prefecture. As the master of the tyrant state, the Black Emperor sect had no intention of stopping the gathering of the Heavenly Union sect's experts. Although the Black Emperor sect was a first-rate force, it was still much weaker than the Heavenly sect. Therefore, it naturally didn't dare to stop them. It could even be said that not only did the Black Emperor sect not stop them in the slightest, they even opened the door for them. The Black Emperor sect had an attitude of staying out of this matter, so the Heavenly sect didn't pay any attention to them. At this moment, there were already over 10,000 experts from the Heavenly sect gathered at the border between the Tyrant Prefecture and the Sword Prefecture. Starships floated in the air, and from afar, it looked like a city in the sky. From time to time, experts from the Katian sect would fly past the various starships. In the middle of the starship, the 7 experts from the Katian sect who had arrived first were gathered together. They had to attack the Sword sect. The 7 of them were the first to arrive. As for the other End Realm experts of the Katian sect, they would arrive one after another. Once the Katian sect gathered all their strength, they would be able to take down the Sword sect. Sitting in a circle, one of the End Realm experts said, "How is it? How much longer do we need to prepare?" "At most 3 days." Hearing that, another person said, "At most 3 days, the experts of the Katian sect would all arrive in the Ba prefecture. At that time, they would be able to attack the Sword sect." Hearing that, the End Realm expert who asked the question nodded his head. 3 days was just a blink of an eye. As for whether or not the Sword sect would take the chance to escape, the experts of the Katian sect weren't worried. After all, the Sword Sect was a sect and not a single person. Since it was a sect, naturally, the monk could run but the temple couldn't. Furthermore, there were many cultivation secret realms in the Sword's Gate that were difficult to relocate in a short period of time. Secondly, the Sword's Gate had been operating in the Jian province for so many years. If they chose to leave, it would undoubtedly be a huge blow to the Sword's Gate. There was no chance of them escaping, so the experts of the Katian sect weren't worried about that at all. They were already making the final preparations to attack Sword Gate. However, the Heavenly Gate obviously didn't know that while they were making their final preparations, the Moon Palace was also making their final preparations. Since they agreed to attack the Sword Sect, Moon Palace naturally had to make a move. When the experts of the Katian sect rushed towards the Ba Prefecture, Moon Palace also made a move. Moon Prefecture, where Moon Palace was located, wasn't far from Tianzhou, where Katian sect was located. Rushing from Moon Prefecture to Tianzhou was obviously much closer than rushing from Tianzhou to Jianzhou. Therefore, when Katian sect transferred many experts to Jianzhou, many experts of Moon Palace also made a move and gathered in Tianzhou. It was obvious that they were going to attack Tianzhou. Moon Palace didn't intend to hide their actions at all. It was done with great fanfare. Therefore, when Moon Palace made a move, many forces received the news. Many forces were stunned when they heard that Moon Palace had started to gather forces in Tianzhou. Then, they all guessed that Moon Palace wasn't planning to launch a sneak attack on Katian sect while Katian sect was attacking the Sword Sect. This was very likely. After all, Katian sect had transferred most of their forces to Jianzhou in order to destroy the Sword Sect as soon as possible. As their headquarters, Tianzhou's defense was definitely at its weakest. At this time, if Moon Palace suddenly made a move, Katian sect probably wouldn't be able to withstand it. Could it be that Moon Palace wanted to be the aureole behind the mantis stalking the cicada? All the major forces guessed this. Following Moon Palace's actions, the entire Great Thousand World seemed to be bustling with noise and excitement. After all, Moon Palace was one of the 10 great Lingtian sect. Every move of Moon Palace would definitely attract the attention of everyone, especially at such a critical time. Moon Palace might be attacking Katian sect. Soon, the news spread throughout the Great Thousand World. The spies of all the major forces immediately sent the news back to their respective sections. All the major forces received the news from Moon Palace. At the same time, Katian sect naturally received the news as well. At this time, a spaceship was speeding toward Jianzhou. This spaceship belonged to Katian sect, and there were many experts of Katian sect on it. Among them, 2 elders of Katian sect were sitting together with a grave expression on their faces. Just a while ago, the 2 of them had received news from Moon Palace. When they heard that Moon Palace had started to gather forces in Tianzhou, their hearts sank. If the Sword Sect was only a potential threat to Katian sect, then Moon Palace was a real threat. With Moon Palace's strength, they were completely capable of fighting Katian sect head-on. They all had grave expressions on their faces. No one expected the Lunar Palace to suddenly make a move at this moment. A cold light flashed in their eyes. One of the Heavenly Gate elders said coldly, "This group of women, of all the times to make a move, they just had to make a move now. What are they trying to do? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2017. Who would have thought that the Moon Palace would reveal their intentions to attack the Heavenly Sect at such a time? The 2 End Realm experts of the Heavenly Sect were solemn. Not only them, but the other experts of the Heavenly Sect had also received the news. The elders of the Heavenly Sect, who had arrived in the Bazhou ahead of time, had also gathered together to discuss the Moon Palace. The Moon Palace had mobilized a large number of experts towards the Tianzhou region. The Heavenly Sect naturally couldn't ignore this. However, they were about to attack the Sword Sect. If they returned to the Tianzhou region, wouldn't they be wasting such a good opportunity? On one hand, there was the threat from the Moon Palace. On the other hand, there was the urgency to destroy the Sword Sect. All of a sudden, the elders of the Heavenly Sect were in a dilemma. They gathered together. One of the elders of the Heavenly Sect said with a cold expression, "The Moon Palace suddenly attacked. From what I see, the attack must have something to do with the Sword Sect. Perhaps the Sword Sect asked for help from the Moon Palace." He guessed that the Moon Palace suddenly attacked because the Sword Sect asked for help. After all, the Moon Palace hadn't done anything for such a long time. Now that they attacked, it was very strange. Hearing this elder's words, the other elders of the Heavenly Sect nodded in agreement. One of them said, "That's true. That is indeed the case. However, what we should be considering right now is whether we should return to Tianzhou or continue to attack Jianzhou. The Moon Palace's actions must have something to do with the Sword Sect. However, the Heavenly Sect couldn't change this. Now, the Heavenly Sect had to make a choice. Should they return to the Tianzhou region to deal with the Moon Palace, or continue to attack the Sword Sect and destroy the Sword Sect? Hearing this elder's words, everyone present fell into silence. This choice was indeed difficult to make. If they chose to destroy the Sword Sect, then if the Moon Palace really attacked the Tianzhou region, then the Tianzhou region would be in danger. However, if they chose to return to the Tianzhou region, then the destruction of the Sword Sect would naturally end in failure. Faced with a difficult choice, all the Heavenly Gate elders fell into deep thought. In the end, the Heavenly Gate elder who spoke first. "With our strength, it's enough to take down the Sword Sect. As for the others who haven't arrived in Bazhou, I think it's better for them to immediately return to Tianzhou and guard against the Moon Palace." Originally, they had planned to wait for the other Heavenly Gate experts to arrive, but now it seemed that there was no need for that. Moreover, they had to be on guard against the Moon Palace. Let those who hadn't reached the overlords return to Tianzhou. As for the Sword Sect, they would be in charge of dealing with them. This way they could take care of both sides. However, without a doubt, this choice was based on the premise that the Lunar Palace did not actually want to attack the Tianzhou province. Otherwise, the Heavenly Gate would not be able to stop the Lunar Palace's attack with their meager strength. This was indeed the elder's consideration. From his point of view, the Lunar Palace did not actually want to attack the Tianzhou province. They only wanted to put pressure on the Heavenly Gate and give the Sword Sect a chance to breathe. Because of this, the elder suggested splitting their forces into two groups. One group would continue to deal with the Sword Sect, while the other group would return to Tianzhou and guard against the Lunar Palace. They would divert a portion of the forces that were supposed to deal with the Sword Sect to defend the Tianzhou province. This way, although their attacks against the Sword Sect would be weaker, it would be enough to deal with the Sword Sect. Hearing the elder's words, the others fell silent for a moment before nodding in agreement. From their point of view, the Lunar Palace did not really want to destroy the Tianzhou province. Furthermore, they did not want to give up on the opportunity to destroy the Sword Sect. After splitting their forces into two groups, the elders of the Heavenly Gate quickly came up with a plan. They immediately sent a message to the experts of the Heavenly Gate who had yet to reach the Overlord region, telling them not to rush to the Overlord region and to return directly to Tianzhou to guard against the Lunar Palace. Faced with the threat from the Lunar Palace, the Heavenly Gate did not give up on dealing with the Sword Sect. In response, Shao Chun and the other higher-ups of the Sword Sect gathered together. Even Lin Qing and Li Ku had returned from the Wu region. They had gathered all their forces to deal with the Heavenly Gate's attack. Sitting on the main seat, Shao Chun looked at Song Xing and the others and said calmly, "It seems like the Heavenly Gate has no plans to retreat. They are determined to destroy the Sword Sect." The reason why the experts of the Heavenly Gate had not retreated was self-evident. Hearing Shao Chen's words, Song Xing replied, "They probably think that the Lunar Palace won't really attack. Therefore, although they have already sent a portion of their forces to guard against the Tianzhou province, The main force is still prepared to deal with the sword sect. Song Xing's words revealed the thoughts of the Heavenly Gate. Xiao Chen nodded slightly. The Heavenly Gate did not think that the Lunar Palace would really attack. They were just putting on an act. Therefore, the Heavenly Gate still used most of their forces to deal with the Sword Sect. However, if the Heavenly Gate wanted to take down the Sword Sect with lightning speed, it would depend on whether the Lunar Palace would give them a chance. Hearing Song Xing's words, Xiao Chen turned to look at Zhou Song and asked, "Second senior brother, what about fourth senior sister?" "Don't worry about it," Zhou Song replied. Knowing that the Heavenly Gate had no intention of retreating because of the Lunar Palace's actions, Xiao Chen immediately asked Zhou Song to send a message to Xiao Xiao. Since the Heavenly Gate thought that the Lunar Palace was just putting on an act, what would happen if the Lunar Palace really attacked the Tianzhou province? Would the Heavenly Gate really just watch as the Tianzhou province fell? Would they also destroy the Sword Sect? Clearly, the Heavenly Gate could not do that. After all, compared to destroying the Sword Sect, the Tianzhou province was the foundation of the Heavenly Gate. Once the Tianzhou province fell, even if the Heavenly Gate destroyed the Sword Sect, what could they do? The gains would not make up for the losses. Xiao Chen's intention was very clear. Since the Katian Gate thought that the Moon Palace was just putting up a show and was still focusing most of their forces on Swords Gate, then the Moon Palace would really launch an attack on the Tianzhou. By then, even if the Katian Gate didn't want to go back, they would still have to. After receiving Xiao Zhao's reply, Xiao Chen nodded slightly. However, he still did not relax. This was because before this, the Sword Sect still had to defend against the Heavenly Gate's attack. They had to defend against the Heavenly Gate's first wave of attacks before they could force the Heavenly Gate to retreat. Otherwise, if the Swords Gate had been forced to retreat from the beginning, giving the Heavenly Gate the hope of annihilating the Swords Gate, it was very likely that the Heavenly Gate would choose to annihilate the Swords Gate in one go, and then return to the Huitian region to fight against the Moon Palace. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2018. They had already received Moon Palace's support, and Moon Palace was willing to attack Tianzhou to force the Heavenly Sect's experts to return. They had already received Moon Palace's support, and Moon Palace was willing to attack Tianzhou to force the Heavenly Sect's experts to return. However, even if Moon Palace was willing to attack, there was a crucial prerequisite. The Sword Sect had to be able to withstand the first round of attacks from the Heavenly Sect. If the Sword Sect was forced to retreat as soon as the Heavenly Sect attacked, even if Moon Palace attacked, the Heavenly Sect would not choose to retreat. Instead, they would try their best to destroy the Sword Sect in the shortest amount of time before returning to Tianzhou. Even if they could not defeat the Heavenly Sect, the Sword Sect had to at least be in a stalemate. In other words, the Heavenly Sect could not take down the Sword Sect instantly. If Heavenly Sect could not take down the Sword Sect in a short period of time, they would be pressured by Moon Palace to retreat to Tianzhou. Therefore, even with Moon Palace's help, the Sword Sect was still under a lot of pressure. The most important thing was naturally how to withstand the first round of attacks from the Heavenly Sect. If they could not even withstand the first round of attacks from the Heavenly Sect, then everything else would be useless. Xiao Chen understood this very well. Therefore, he looked down at Song Xing, Zhou Song, Wu Huan and the others and said in a serious tone, "The key to this battle is the first round. As long as we can withstand the first round of attacks from the Heavenly Sect, the situation will be completely reversed. Therefore, all the resources in the Sword Sect will be used in the first round. No matter what, we must withstand the first round of attacks from the Heavenly Sect. All the resources would be used in the first round." Song Xing and the others did not have any objections to Xiao Chen's words. Although it seemed like they were putting all their eggs in one basket, in reality, the Sword Sect had no other choice at the moment. If they won the first round, the Heavenly Sect could only retreat to Tianzhou and defend Moon Palace. If they lost the first round, the Sword Sect would probably be doomed. Everything would depend on the outcome of the first battle. Xiao Chun told everyone to get ready. They would head to the border between the Jian province and the Ba province tonight. The experts of the Heavenly Sect had already gathered in the Bazhou. Naturally, the Sword Sect would not remain idle. They had already set up a line of defense at the border between the Bazhou and the Sword provinces. At this moment, almost all the experts of the Sword Sect had gathered here. From the actions of the Heavenly Gate, it was clear what they meant. Therefore, it was time for Xiao Chen and the others to rush to the battlefield. After returning to the cave residence and bidding farewell to Qin Shuru and the other girls, Xiao Chen and Xianyuan Ling rushed to the border between the two prefectures. Of course, Song Xing and the others were also with them. Through the teleportation formation, that night, Xiao Chen and the others rushed to the Sword Sect's line of defense. Looking towards the Ba province, they could vaguely see the Heavenly Sect's fleet of spaceship. Although the Moon Palace's sudden attack caused the Heavenly Sect to not be able to gather all their strength in the Ba province, over 50% of their strength was still gathered here. According to the intel, there were 7 End Realm experts in front of Xiao Chen and the others. Below them were Dao Realm and Comprehension Realm experts. There were close to 100 of them. Frowning slightly, even though they were facing less than 50% of the Heavenly Sect's strength, Xiao Chen still felt pressure. Especially in terms of the number of End Realm experts, the Sword Sect was one behind the Heavenly Sect. This battle was indeed not an easy one. The pressure that the Sword Sect was facing was huge. Moreover, they definitely wouldn't hold back against the Heavenly Sect. With the current situation, the Heavenly Sect's experts still chose to stay in the Ba province and didn't retreat. They wanted to take down the Sword Sect in one fell swoop. Therefore, the Heavenly Sect would definitely try their best to destroy the Sword Sect in the shortest amount of time. Of course, as the Sword Sect, what Xiao Chen needed to do now was to think of a way to drag the battle into a stalemate. At the very least, they couldn't let the Heavenly Sect take down the Sword Sect quickly. The Sword Sect needed to drag out time. The longer they dragged it out, the more advantageous it would be for them. On the other hand, the Heavenly Sect needed to take down the Sword Sect as soon as possible. Just as the two sides were facing each other at the border of the two prefectures, the Moon Palace launched an attack on the Tianzhou region on the other side. Many of the Moon Palace cultivators entered the Tianzhou region directly. Naturally, the Heavenly Gate reacted immediately to the Moon Palace cultivators' actions. The two sides erupted into a great battle in the Tianzhou region. However, because half of the Heavenly Sect's strength was gathered in the Ba province, preparing to attack the Sword Sect, the Heavenly Sect was clearly at a disadvantage against the Moon Palace. It was merely the first time they had come into contact, yet the Heavenly Gate had already fallen into a disadvantageous position, retreating step by step. On the other hand, the Lunar Palace's side advanced triumphantly. Not only did they break through the Heavenly Gate's defenses, they even seized the cultivation resources of many forces in the Tianzhou province. The Moon Palace's goal wasn't truly to take over the Tianzhou region and destroy the Heavenly Sect. However, since the Heavenly Sect didn't have enough strength to defend the Tianzhou region, the Moon Palace naturally didn't mind plundering the Tianzhou region. After all, who would complain about having too many cultivation resources? With such a great opportunity, the Moon Palace experts naturally didn't hold back. Along the way, they plundered all the forces in the Tianzhou region. The Moon Palace had already begun their attack on the Tianzhou region and had already caused the Heavenly Sect to suffer significant losses. On the other side, the Heavenly Sect experts in the Ba province also prepared to attack the Sword Sect after receiving the news. With the Moon Palace attacking, there wasn't much time left for the Heavenly Sect. Immediately, the Heavenly Sect experts in the Ba province attacked the Sword province. Following the heavenly sect's attack, Shao Chun naturally prepared to fight. At the border between the two provinces, the sword sect and the heavenly sect experts met. Shao Chun stood proudly in the sky, surrounded by Tsang Xing and the others. At the same time, 7 heavenly sect elders also stood in the sky opposite him. The two sides faced each other from a distance. One of the heavenly sect elders looked at Shao Chun and said calmly, "Shao Chun, you should know that the sword sect's strength can't stop us. If you surrender, I can guarantee that I won't kill you. I'm even willing to give you a position as an elder of the heavenly sect. How about it?" A position as an elder of the heavenly sect wanted Shao Chun to surrender? Shao Chun smiled coldly when he heard the words of the heavenly sect elder. "Don't talk nonsense. Everyone knows the situation of your heavenly sect. Why don't you retreat to the Tianzhou region? I can also guarantee that I won't do anything to your heavenly sect," Shao Chun said with a smile. Now that the heavenly sect's backyard was on fire, they still pretended to be calm and even wanted Shao Chun to surrender. How could that be possible? Please add, recommend, vote. Chapter 2019. Shao Chun and the Sword Sect clearly had no intention of surrendering. Hearing this, the 7 End Realm experts from the Heavenly Sect didn't waste any more words and immediately gave the order to attack. Time was of the essence for the Heavenly Sect. Now that the Moon Palace had started to attack the Tianzhou, if the Heavenly Sect couldn't take down the Sword Sect in the shortest amount of time, the situation would become more and more difficult for the Heavenly Sect. Tens of thousands of experts from the Heavenly Sect immediately attacked the Sword Sect. Facing this, Shao Chun and the others didn't cower in the slightest. At the same time, they directly used the various trump cards that they had already prepared. On the battlefield, the Sword Sect had already set up many talisman arrays. Now that they were facing the attack of so many experts from the Heavenly Sect, the Sword Sect naturally didn't hesitate to activate these talisman arrays. Talisman arrays shot into the sky. There were offensive talisman arrays and defensive talisman arrays. Following the appearance of these talisman arrays, many experts from the Heavenly Sect were directly trapped within. Knowing the importance of the first battle, the Sword Sect had to defend this battle. Otherwise, it would be difficult to make the Heavenly Sect retreat. Therefore, Shao Chun didn't hesitate and used all of his resources on this battle. More than 80% of the talisman arrays in the Sword Sect were used in this battle. Among them, the high-grade talisman arrays were completely used up. With the help of the talisman arrays, the Heavenly Sect suffered heavy losses without any direct contact. After all, the power of high-grade talisman arrays was naturally not ordinary. Seeing so many experts from the Heavenly Sect fall into the talisman arrays, the 7 elders from the Heavenly Sect also had gloomy expressions. Glancing over, many talisman arrays shot into the sky. Within these talisman arrays, many experts from the Heavenly Sect were trapped. His expression was extremely gloomy as one of the Heavenly Sect elders said coldly, "Stubborn resistance, you don't know your place." As he spoke, he chose to attack. However, at this moment, Tsang Xing and the others also made their moves to meet the elders of the Coiling Heaven Sect. The Sword Sect had 6 deputy sect leaders, which meant that they had 6 End Realm experts. However, joining Heaven Sect had 7 End Realm experts. In terms of numbers, joining Heaven Sect had 1 less person. With that, 6 against 7, this was obviously disadvantageous for the Sword Sect. However, just as both sides attacked, Zhou Song and Wu Huan took out a series of talismans from their storage rings. These talismans were the highest level talismans in the Sword Sect. According to Tsang Xing, these talismans were obtained from the Sword Sect during its heyday. They were extremely extraordinary. For the sake of this battle, Shao Chun had taken out all the high-level talismans, which could be considered as the foundation of the Sword Gate. At the same time, they activated the talismans. Very quickly, These talismans formed a trap formation, trapping one of the elders of the Coiling Heavens sect within. They didn't have as many people as the Coiling Heavens sect, so they obviously had no chance of winning. With that, the best way was to find a way to trap one of them. However, as Zhou Song and Wu Huan activated the trapping array, the trapped Heavenly Sect Elder suddenly revealed a cold smile on his face. "You want to trap me with a mere trap formation? What wishful thinking." This elder was trapped in the trap formation, but his expression didn't change at all. Instead, he was filled with disdain. At the level of an End Realm expert, it was obviously impossible to rely on talismans to trap them. Even if it was a high-grade talisman formation, it would be extremely difficult to trap an End Realm expert. They were temporarily trapped by the glyph array, but this kind of siege obviously wouldn't last for too long. Everyone present knew this. However, Zhou Song and Wu Huan obviously didn't think that this trap formation would be able to trap this End Realm expert. This trap formation was just to stall for time. After using the trap formation to temporarily trap this Coiling Heaven Sect Elder, Song Xing and Lin Qing took out 6 ancient longswords from their storage rings at almost the same time. These 6 ancient longswords had been worshipped in the Sword Sect for many years. They were personally crafted by Sword Venerable Patian. When the 6 longswords appeared, 6 sharp sword lights rushed into the sky. At the same time, under the control of Song Xing and Lin Qing, these 6 longswords directly shot towards the Elder of the Coiling Heaven Sect. Celestial Slaying Sword Formation. Seeing the appearance of these 6 longswords, the Elder of the Coiling Heaven Sect, who was already trapped in the talisman formation, had a change in expression. He couldn't help but say. When he was trapped by the talisman formation, this elder's expression didn't change at all. However, at this moment, when he saw these 6 long swords, a deep look of fear appeared in his eyes. The celestial slaying sword formation could be considered the true foundation of the sword sect. It was formed by 6 longswords personally crafted by Sword Venerable Patian. Once the formation was formed, its power was enough to kill an End Realm expert. They didn't expect the Sword Sect to take out the Celestial Slaying Sword formation. The 7 elders of the Coiling Heavens sect didn't expect this at all. Being trapped by the Talisman formation and facing the attack of the Celestial Slaying Sword formation, this elder of the Coiling Heavens sect wasn't as relaxed as before. Facing other methods, this elder could choose to ignore them. However, facing the Celestial Slaying Sword formation, this elder didn't dare to underestimate it at all. After all, this Celestial Slaying Sword formation was infamous. It had indeed killed End Realm experts before. A sword formation that could kill End Realm experts. He had to be careful when facing it. The Celestial Slaying Sword formation totally trapped this Coiling Heaven sect elder. In a short time, this elder obviously wouldn't be able to break free. Even if it was just a small matter, just facing the Celestial Slaying Sword formation was enough to make this elder feel a lot of pressure. They temporarily solved the threat of one Coiling Heaven sect elder. With that, the Coiling Heaven sect's advantage in numbers didn't exist anymore. They originally had 7 End Realm experts, but now the Sword sect only needed to face 6 of them. 6 against 6, with the same number of people. Song Xing and the others didn't fear the 6 elders of the Coiling Heaven sect. The plan went very smoothly. However, seeing one of their people trapped by the immortal slaying sword formation, the other 6 elders of the Heavenly sect had extremely ugly expressions. Right away, one of their End Realm experts was trapped. This was something that the Coiling Heaven sect didn't expect and wasn't willing to see. Their original advantage was gone. Looking at the 6 of Song Xing, one of the Coiling Heaven sect elders said coldly, "You don't know your place. Even if you try to resist, how long can you last?" As he said that, the 6 End Realm experts of the Coiling Heaven sect attacked. Facing this, Song Xing and the others didn't have any intentions of retreating and charged forwards. All of a sudden, the end realm experts of both sides clashed. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2020. Other cultivators couldn't interfere in the battle between End Realm experts. Around the intense battle, be it the Sword Sect or Heavenly Sect experts, no one dared to get close. They used the Celestial Slaying Sword formation to trap one of the Heavenly Sect elders. With that, in a 6 versus 6 situation, Song Xing and the others obviously didn't fear the 6 elders of the Heavenly Sect. After all, in a 1 versus 1 situation, even if there was a difference in strength between End Realm experts, it was hard to kill one another. Which was why it wasn't a problem for them to tangle with one another. The key was the battle between the End Realm experts. Relying on the Celestial Slaying Sword formation, the Sword Sect temporarily stabilized their footing. As for the cultivators of other levels, both sides were engaged in an intense battle. Apart from those trapped by the formation, the remaining experts of the Heavenly Sect were also in an intense battle with the Sword Sect. One had to say that the top 10 Lingtian sects were indeed worthy of their reputation. Even if the Heavenly Sect only gathered 50% of their strength, and because of the large amounts of formations the Sword Sect laid out, many people were trapped within and couldn't get out. Even then, the Heavenly Sect still had the advantage in the intense battle. Apart from End Realm experts, the Heavenly Sect was much stronger than the Sword Sect in terms of other levels. It was also because they relied on formations and trump cards that the Sword Sect was able to tangle with the Heavenly Sect and not lose. Xiao Chen had never underestimated the strength of the Heavenly Sect. After all, with the current strength of the Sword Sect, they didn't have the right to underestimate the Heavenly Sect. In the entire battle, overall, the Heavenly Sect still had the advantage. However, this advantage wasn't big and wasn't big enough to crush the Sword Sect. With that, Xiao Chen and the others had achieved their goal. After all, from the very beginning, Xiao Chen, Song Xing, and the other higher-ups of the Sword Sect had never thought of defeating the Heavenly Gate. As long as they could delay the Heavenly Gate and prevent them from taking down the Sword Sect quickly, Xiao Chen and the others would have completed their mission. It seemed that Xiao Chen's plan had succeeded for the time being. However, whether they could really block the first round of attacks from the Heavenly Gate still required everyone's persistence. After all, the battle had just begun. The battle continued and Xiao Chen was currently engaged in a fierce battle with a Dao Realm expert from Heavenly Sect. Although Xiao Chen was facing a Dao Realm expert from the Heavenly Sect with a cultivation base at the Great Circle of the Enlightenment State, he was still able to fight back. Despite being at a disadvantage, Xiao Chen was still able to exchange blows with this Heavenly Sect Dao Realm expert. The sword body had already been displayed and the two of them were surrounded by Xiao Chen's Sword Realm. Being in the Sword Realm, the Heavenly Sect Dao Realm expert was actually having a hard time. He had long heard that sword cultivators who possessed the sword body were very powerful. However, after the battle with Xiao Chen today, the Heavenly Sect Dao Realm expert finally understood the true meaning of this sentence. Indeed, with the sword body and the ability to display the sword realm, Xiao Chen was indeed much more powerful than other sword cultivators of the same cultivation base. In particular, the sword realm was difficult for the Dao Realm expert to deal with. Under Xiao Chen's control, the blood-red longswords kept attacking the Dao Realm expert. The Dao Realm expert was exhausted in the face of the endless attacks from the blood-red swords that were impossible to guard against. The Sword Realm was like a world created by Xiao Chen. In this world, Xiao Chen was fully deserving of being the master. His combat strength was constantly suppressed by the Sword Realm. At the same time, the crimson swords that appeared from time to time made the Dao Realm expert break out in cold sweat. He wanted to use brute force to break Xiao Chen's Sword Realm. However, after several attempts, he still couldn't succeed. With Xiao Chen's current strength, In addition to his understanding and control of the sword body, the sword realm that Shao Chun displayed now couldn't be broken by brute force unless one's cultivation base reached the end realm. The Heavenly Sect Dao Realm expert had tried many times but still couldn't break Shao Chun's sword realm. Shao Chun didn't hold back at all. Countless crimson long swords floated in the air around him. With a thought, the crimson long swords could instantly attack the Dao Realm expert from all directions. Damn it! Since he couldn't do anything to Shao Chun, the Dao Realm expert was furious. He originally thought that with his Dao Realm cultivation base, it wouldn't be a problem to take down Shao Chun, a junior who was at the great perfection of the comprehension realm. However, after fighting with Shao Chun, the Dao Realm expert realized that although Shao Chun's cultivation base was only at the great perfection of the comprehension realm, his combat strength wasn't weaker than a Dao Realm expert. Especially the sword body and sword realm. In the eyes of the Dao Realm expert, they were unbreakable technique. No matter how he attacked, he couldn't break them. The battle on Shao Chun's side was obviously in a stalemate. Neither of them could do anything to the other. However, on the other side, Xian Yuanling's side was completely one-sided. Xian Yuanling was at the small perfection of the comprehension realm, and the one fighting with him was a heavenly sect expert who was at the small perfection of the comprehension realm. Although the heavenly sect expert was at the small perfection of the comprehension realm, he didn't seem to have any power to fight back in front of Xian Yuanling. No one knew what Xian Yuanling did, but Xian Yuanling's attack was extremely mysterious. His whole body emitted an indescribable aura. The aura didn't seem like cultivation base, nor did it seem like the power of law. Anyway, it was very strange. Under the shroud of the aura, the heavenly sect expert's mind seemed to be affected. He was sometimes clear-headed and sometimes confused. As such, he naturally couldn't be Xian Yuanling's opponent. It was a complete one-sided suppression. Without wasting too much time, Xian Yuanling directly killed the heavenly sect expert. Just as Xian Yuanling easily killed his opponent, an elder from the heavenly gate, who was in an intense battle with Song Xing, inadvertently felt the aura from Xian Yuanling's body. He suddenly looked over and discovered the mysterious aura surrounding Xian Yuanling's body. Immediately, the elder spoke with a face full of surprise. The power of reincarnation, the aura around Xian Yuanling, was none other than the power of reincarnation. The power of reincarnation was a very mysterious power. In the entire Great Thousand World, there were very few people who could control the power of reincarnation. Among them, the most famous one was naturally the Reincarnation Emperor. The Reincarnation Emperor was also the first peerless expert to rely on the power of reincarnation to ascend to the position of an emperor since ancient times. Back then, when the Reincarnation Emperor was still all-powerful in the Great Thousand World, he was definitely one of the more powerful emperors. His means were unpredictable. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.